This is the Comics Alternative, episode 289, a look at the August Previews catalog. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And this week, Paul and I are going to go through the August Previews catalog, and there's a lot to talk about there. But before we get into that discussion, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by those great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredible, mind-blowing specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price. Sometimes 50% off cover, but occasionally you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
So let me tell you what's going to happen. We are going to talk through the previews catalog. You are going to find all the things that we're talking about that intrigue you there at DCBS. And then you're going to see these bundles, and you're not going to be able to resist. Because let me tell you, DC bundles at 50 to 60% off, including a Vertigo bundle, a Jinx World bundle, a DC Universe bundle. You're going to see Marvel bundles at 50% off. You're going to see Valiant bundles. And it's just such an amazing discount that it's going to be really, really hard to resist, I'll tell you. So check out those bundles and all the great discounts at DCBS.
That's right. You can't beat their prices at Discount Comic Book Service. The website is dcbservice.com. You just got to go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
Yeah, we'd appreciate that.
Paul, before we get into the August Previews catalog, I want to mention something about a particular podcast that I've been listening to lately, and it's one that I think our listeners would get a lot out of, and it's something that you do, in fact.
Well, thanks. Appreciate the promotional push, Derek.
Yeah. Now, you and your colleague at Multiversity, Matt Loon, have started not too long ago a new podcast called Motherbox.
Yeah, it's a fun exploration through the fourth world, set of titles that Jack Kirby created in the early 70s. And, both Matt and I are interested comics readers who are somewhat informed, but neophytes when it comes to the deep world of Kirby that I know that many people out there are passionate lovers of. And so for us, it's an education, and we're sort of inviting others to join us in it, whether you are, well steeped in Kirby lore, or whether it's going to be new for you as well. We've been reading through, your Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen issues, and of course, New Gods and Mr. Miracle, and Forever People. And it's just it's kind of a fun read through project. And thank you, Derek, for the chance to talk about it here. You can find it on your usual podcast apps and things like that. But it's called Motherbox, a New Gods podcast.
Yeah, and I remember you were telling me about this about, a month and a half, 2 months ago, and you guys started off by, I think, one episode of your old podcast, The Comic Syllabus, you talked about, I guess what was the first half of the first episode, and then on Matt's podcast, That's the Issue.
Yeah.
You guys talked about it as well, and that was the second half of the first episode. And then I think it was last week, your second episode, I guess the first formal episode for the new podcast came out. And, a couple of months ago when you were talking with me about this, I started, because I'd never read it before, I started to read that first volume of the complete Fourth World. I don't have the omnibus, but I have from a number of years ago the 4 hardbound volumes that I guess make up, in essence, the new omnibus.
Yeah.
So I started that, and then I let it sit for about a month. And then when last week your second episode of Motherbox came out, I thought, okay, I gotta get back to it, and I have to refresh myself on this. So I started that first volume all over again. So I'm up to the first issues. Actually, I'm up to, I get right past those first issues of like Forever People, The New Gods, and back with that next issue of Jimmy Olsen. Where Olsen confronts himself as kind of a Hulk figure. Yeah, that's it's wild. There's a lot to make fun of, I think. But one of the things that I've gained from listening to you and Matt discuss it is taking it more seriously than I think I originally did when I first began to read this first volume a couple of months ago. So our listeners should definitely check that out. Even if they're not Kirby fans, I think that you guys bring an intelligent take to the New Gods or the Fourth World comics.
Oh, thanks, Derek. That means so much coming from you. And, we do intend to have guests, and you're top of the list of folks we'd love to have on to talk about some of these comics, especially as you're checking them out with us. I think that sensibility you're talking about, where we're trying to have a little playfulness with it and a sense of humor about it, comes out of Kirby himself. He knows the imagination and bombast that you're supposed to, have a little fun with. But we also do, indeed, take it somewhat seriously, because we want to honor the man's work and honor its importance. So a little bit of both tones. And Matt is a great friend and great co-host to do it with. Although I am spoiled by great co-hosts for podcasts.
Who you should have on as a guest is my webcomics co-host, Sean Kleefeld, because he does writing for the Kirby Collector.
Yeah, I knew that, actually. Sean, you are in our sights, so if you're listening, expect an email from me sometime. It'd be great to have you too.
Okay, let's jump into the August Previews catalog. And, as many times as we plan to limit ourselves, it's like we won't go too long. With preview shows, we almost always do. So let's go ahead and get started with this. And, the first section now of the revamped catalog from a few months ago is now Image is the first publisher. And so where do you begin with Image?
I begin with the first title, which is Blackbird, which is really the one that they have on the first Image page, for instance. It's also the gracing the cover of the latest and last, for now, issue of Image Plus. I don't know if you knew that, Derek, that they're wrapping up Image Plus. And so this month's Image Plus features Blackbird by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel on its cover. And then I think they're going to stop it for whatever reason for a time. But and I've enjoyed that little magazine with its interviews and articles and pieces and things. But Blackbird, to come back to it, is a new number one, as I said, by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel. And it calls it a neo-noir fantasy, and it really is trying to appeal, I think, to fans of, say, The Wicked and the Divine, which has had a ton of heat. But I think that interest is, as Wicked and Divine gets nearer to its end, is I feel like there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy around that book that's looking for a next place to go, and I think Blackbird is trying to fill that void. Jen Bartel is an artist who has been doing a lot of covers and smaller pieces, and I think people are really excited to see that art. And we get to see a few preview pages on display. It's pretty great, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, you're right. A few pages, not just one or two of sample art. And, I have to say, we have on page 40, the very beginning of the Image section, or, I guess the second page of the Image section,
right.
Both the main cover, which is by Bartel, and then a smaller sample cover by Fiona Staples. Now, I really love Fiona Staples' work, but I have to say that Bartel's cover A, it knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, really, these are the heavy hitters here, and I love that this aesthetic of Bartel's and really of Fiona Staples, who I think was trailblazer in many ways. To me, that's like the loudest example of what Image is these days. I think it's in terms of sales. I mean, that and Walking Dead in terms of sales, but also in terms of style. It's such a cool thing that didn't exist 10 years ago or whatever. So.
Yeah. Now, you were mentioning something about the Image style, and maybe that's a good transition into my next pick, which is actually the next solicit, Dead Rabbit, number 1, which is on page 44. Now, this is written by Jerry Duggan and with art by John McCrae.
Right.
You know, in reading through the Image section this month, and there's some things that I like, I'm interested in, you know, the aforementioned Blackbird, Dead Rabbit, and then others that we can discuss. But I couldn't help but think in reading through this month's previews and the Image section in particular about a conversation that you and I have had one or two times in the not too distant past. And that is in some ways kind of the sameness of Image in a variety of ways. Now, that's not to take away from what Blackbird is going to be and what Dead Rabbit is going to be. Nonetheless, it doesn't strike me that with Image lately, there have been that many different things. And by different, I'm pointing out as an example something, I mean, obviously like The Walking Dead from years ago when it started, but also Saga. I mean, I think that was a very different kind of title. Every now and again, we do get something quite different and unique from Image, but more times than not, I don't want to say it's the same old, because that sounds rather negative, but it's nothing that new, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, you know, I like Dead Rabbit, and so it's unfortunate that I like what it's selling right now. So it's unfortunate we happen to be talking about it now, especially that this Dave Johnson cover that we're looking at over here on page 44 is another example of Dave Johnson brilliance. But, you know, it's a sort of crime story that's semi-dark. And then so with the presence now of your Aftershocks and your Black Masks and things like that, there is an extension in those other publishers of a certain sameness of tone crime stories that are, you know, somewhat dark and have these anti-heroes and stuff like that only exacerbate the problem, which is just that, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have a lot of options of interesting, great comics that are, you know, different from the superhero stuff. And, but, you know, I guess I feel exactly the same. I thought exactly the same as I went through the catalog, which does, I mean, it means that when things stick out, they do stick out. And I like that about it. I mean, there's been some recent Image stuff, Scales and Scoundrels jumps to mind, and a few other things that actually are different. And when they, you know, do something unique, I really am attracted to that. But, yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah, and you know, the premise of Dead Rabbit, as intriguing as it is nothing new under the sun. Here we have someone who was a criminal. He's described as a stick-up man and a hoodlum who had retired, and people thought that he wasn't around anymore. They didn't know if he even was living. But now he's come back because of some circumstances, and he's making his mark again. And again, nothing really new. And you know, in bringing this up about the quote-unquote sameness of various Image titles over the past several years, that is not in any way to denigrate anything that Image has done, or even with these new comics that we're discussing on this episode. It's just, it's a sameness. And so if you're okay with that, then fine. You know, no problem.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, you know, we also have sameness with the mainstream. So why can't we have this return to similar story or story types with the non-superhero comics as well? I mean, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, this is what happens with genre, right? And these comics are always some kind of genre mix. In fact, at the bottom of Dead Rabbit, it said, if you like the genre blending narrative of The Departed and a good Brubaker Phillips series, you'll love Dead Rabbit. It's always this genre mashed with that genre, or whatever, with this exemplar mashed with that exemplar. But I mean, you know, this is kind of what happens with genre. And I think, to me, my response to that feeling about Image, which, like, I agree with you, I wouldn't fault any individual creator with it, you know, but I think what it means is that when people do stretch those genre identifications or those sort of visual signals of what it is, when they do try to be imaginative, I should reward Image and let Image know this is what I want. And so when you're, you know, any chance that I get to support, like, you know, a series like I mentioned, Scales and Scoundrels, or I feel like even the recent Last Siege is pretty different. I feel like everything that Rich Tommaso has been doing has been different. I always try to sort of put my bucks behind my encouragement to keep stretching those genre boundaries.
Yeah. Where do you go next in Image?
There's a couple of number ones that, to be honest, I'm not super excited about, but there's Errand Boys number 1, Exorsisters number 1. Again, nothing bad about them, just nothing that grabs my interest. Infinite Dark number 1, but the next one that grabs my attention is Murder Falcon, which is on page 56. So
okay, yeah. Now I did mark Exorsisters number 1, which is on page 50, as something that sounded interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the solicit reads, did you sign a deal with the devil? Has your fiance been dragged to hell? Then Kate with a K and Kate with a C, Harrow should be the first ones you call for timely soul retrieval at a reasonable price. Why are these identical twins so different? Is there a darker secret? An all-new ongoing series by Eisner-winning writer Ian Boothby and art by Giselle Lagasse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems interesting. I don't know. The twin sisters doing their thing reminds me immediately of the Patty Duke show. Meet Kate, who's been most everywhere from hell. Okay. So, I don't know. I mean, that seemed to have some possibility. And then another number 1 title before we get to page 56 that may be interesting. I don't know. This is on 54, and it is Juke Joint number 1. And one of the reasons why this caught my attention, well, first off, the title, Juke Joint, just sounds interesting. I mean, I know what a juke joint is, but I like the sound of the word juke. So there's that. But also, this is written by T. Franklin, and we talked about T. Franklin several months back for our Valentine's show with her book, Bingo Love.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting title. So this is written by T. Franklin with art by Aletha E. Martinez.
Yeah.
And it's about a juke joint in 1950s New Orleans. It says the juke joint keeps the jazz poppin', people boppin', and the women are to die for. There's only one rule: keep your hands to yourself. But some men think rules don't apply to them, and Mahala and her coven of slain women enjoy reminding them that they most certainly do. And so, the whole kind of supernatural thing is kind of almost, it seems, as an afterthought embedded in that solicit of coven of slain women. Say, huh? Okay, so this is not just any kind of juke joint. It's a juke joint that is populated by slain women who, let me see the word coven. Maybe there's something witch-like about them. I don't know. There's something a little incomplete about that solicit. Nonetheless, it caught my attention.
Yeah. It does seem interesting, and I should say, Aletha Martinez, who did the art for Black Panther: World of Wakanda, a miniseries that got some Eisner love. Actually, I really liked her art in that series, and I think it's a very cool style. And interesting to have it shift from a kind of superhero world, although it was a very sort of different take on superheroes, to now a horror bent. And I enjoyed Bingo Love too. And I sort of read it as when it came out. There's been a little bit of chatter on the internet, and I usually don't indulge in talking about internet chatter, especially if it's just sort of the rumor mill. But since few comics journalism sites have reported on this, there's been a little bit of chatter about a bit of public controversy, public spat between T. Franklin and some of the artists that worked with her. And I won't, I don't want to besmirch anybody. People can look for that themselves. But it raised an interesting conversation in comics Twitter about how writers and artists treat each other and things like that. So just folks are interested, they can look for that.
Interesting. I don't keep up with social media chatter like that. So I always hear it, third hand or fourth hand, like in this case. So
yeah.
Not even second hand.
I will be one of the hands.
You'll be one of the hands. So you say you go to Murder Falcon number 1 on page 56.
Yeah. I just mentioned it because Extremity by Daniel Warren Johnson, I think a lot of people liked it. I liked it. I thought it was a very dramatic, which Johnson's art is. It's just very cool. He has great style that is very detailed and full of cool noodling and awesome monsters and tech. And we see a little bit more of that from writer-artist Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer as well. So this is Murder Falcon, a world under attack by monsters, and Jake, who has no band, no girl, no future. He's like wielding a guitar at the front. Murder Falcon is one of these sort of, I guess, a monster-like creature, although he seems like maybe he's on Jake's side. This is the power of metal fuels Murder Falcon, and he's got a gigantic mechanical arm or something like that. So it's definitely got that Daniel Warren Johnson flavor.
I next go to page 59, and this is Wytches Bad Egg Halloween Special. This is a one-shot, and as they describe in the solicit, this is in many ways kind of a prequel to the much-anticipated second volume of Wytches. We haven't really had anything from Scott Snyder and Jock in terms of Wytches in a while. I'm glad it's coming back. It's just taken a while. And the reason why I wanted to point this out is not so much to anticipate this second volume, whenever it begins, of Wytches, but this is the first, I think, instance that we'll see many examples of on this episode, I think, of titles that are slotted for Halloween.
Yeah.
And I know that every year we try to do a Halloween special or semi-special where we look at either seasonal Halloween titles or horror titles that come out around the time of Halloween. And so this may be one of the ones that we check out.
Yeah. And actually it's collecting the new material of Wytches that was in Image Plus for a while. And I wonder if that also coincides with Image Plus ending its run for now and gathering that stuff together with a conclusion that's new. So if people have been reading that in Image Plus, then it kind of ties a bow on this little interstitial story here in Wytches, which is of course Wytches, which is of course something that people were huge fans of, and I think Jock's art is so creepy in this book
It is.
It's pretty great. So yeah.
Well, I think that's just one of the reasons why we can mourn the upcoming demise of Image Plus is because they did do different things. I mean, not only did we get the interviews that you mentioned and the brief write-ups, but we also got installments of different stories that weren't a part of any Image titles. There's, what we're describing now, this Bad Egg Halloween special that's now being collected. But we also had Here's Negan earlier. So, Image was doing with their supplemental what DC and Marvel don't do. And I don't want to take away from what DC and Marvel do with their own catalogs. It's nothing more than just a mini previews that only is devoted to their products, right?
Yeah.
But with Image Plus, we got a lot more. We got larger art. We had a magazine size. We had the interviews.
Yeah.
We had the unique brand new comic installments.
Yeah. It makes me sad a little bit, the thought that maybe they're discontinuing it because it hasn't been done as well as they hoped, or it flagging interest or whatever, which is too bad because later we're going to see another series here in Image that is a collection of something that was in Island, an anthology, the Brendan Graham anthology and stuff that I really liked Island. And I just realized that when I read Image Plus or when I read and support something like Island, I'm probably in the minority, it's like for the diehards. And I wish that weren't the case. And maybe we're all spoiled because even if we ignore the Image Plus stuff, we know that the stuff that is really valuable to readers will end up republished like this in some way. So, people, and with the availability of digital, it's just so much easier to get your hands on material than it used to be. But I think there's something to mourn the loss of in that things like Image Plus and maybe things like Island, that us nerds really loved following and reading 5 pages of this and 15 pages of that here and there just are not along for this life.
Right.
Yeah. Well, where do you go next from there?
I go to page 67.
Yeah. That.
Do you have anything before that?
Actually, I just want to pause at Norroway book 1 at page 60. I don't know if you spotted this, but it's written by Kat Seaton and drawn by Kit Seaton.
I thought you may want to point this out.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Afar, which was I'm suddenly blanking on Leila Del Duca, I think. And is that right? Yeah, Leila Del Duca and written and I think it was Kat Seaton on art, or no, Kit Seaton on art. And so now they have this sort of a fantasy story with a magic bull. And it's coming out as an OGN, which is interesting as an approach. So this is an advanced solicit. But yeah, again, this is Image doing different things. And I've been liking this line of fantasy work. And often it's maybe appealing to, well, I don't know if that's fair to say, but yeah, it just looks really good. A few pages of sample art there. And I've liked Seaton's art. So this will be a fun adventure, I think.
Yeah, I liked, I guess, Well Enough Afar. We reviewed it back in spring of last year. Mm-hmm. It didn't bowl me over, but I thought it was okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't note Norroway as something to bring up. But I'm glad you did, though. Yeah.
And they mention here as the comp. They always put these comps on the bottom. Jen Wang's The Prince and the Dressmaker, which Gwen and I talked about earlier this year, which makes me realize that, a lot of some of these titles, the way that certain crime stories that, some of us are very familiar with have this kind of aestheticized violence. Some of these other books, like The Prince and the Dressmaker, have this is dumb to say, aestheticized fashion, where the sort of the art direction is all in the fashion and architecture and design. And, when you think about the kind of investment that is involved in, say, making a movie or a TV show, when the art direction is really good, when the sets and the colors and the costume is all like just perfectly chosen, sometimes not even noticeable, but it just sort of achieves an effect. Like, to have an artist invest all of that into comic book pages, and often solo, in this case, Kit Seaton and I'm sure with Kat together, but, figuring out the aesthetic of all of these costumes and the colors and the design and all that kind of stuff, it's a pretty great feat. And if you look at the cover of Norroway #1, you definitely see the bull in the back, the magical bull in the back, but also the costume design of this main character, Sibylla, is pretty cool. So that's a lot of the artistry that may go unnoticed by people like me, who, if you looked at me right now, you would say he has no idea about fashion, which is true. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Yeah. 67, did you want to go to?
Yeah, 67. Okay. And, in the pages leading up to and including 67, I think it's worth mentioning that this month we have quite a number of trade paperbacks that are being solicited. And some are, I guess, trade paperbacks of books that originally had come out in hardcover, like The Complete Fade Out, Brubaker and Phillips, but also their current series that they have going on right now, Volume 2 of Gasolina, the first volume of Gideon Falls, the second volume of Grave Diggers Union. Yeah. But on page, and others, but the thing on page 67 that caught my attention is Jason Aaron and Ron Garney's Men of Wrath. Yeah. And this is coming out as a hardcover edition, and it collects Men of Wrath 1 through 5. And the reason I wanted to point this out is, correct me if I'm wrong, this originally came out through Marvel, correct?
Oh, you might be right about that. Maybe it's like the last title of the Icon line or something like that. It was maybe an imprint in Marvel.
Or the last non-Bendis.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I think you're right.
That line.
That's funny.
Yeah, and I think it came out a couple of years ago, and I noted it. I never got around to reading it, but I always wanted to. And the reason, is you're dealing with a kind of crime kind of fiction by Jason Aaron, which I appreciate. So anyway, I wanted to mention that. So apparently they've taken their property and are now doing it at Image, this new hardcover edition.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. No, I mean, actually, I think this came out not long before Southern Bastards started, and it seemed like a lot of Jason Aaron's energies about the South went there. But this featured, I remember, I have it in trade from Marvel, but it featured Ron Garney's art, where Ron Garney sort of took a turn towards the Sin City Frank Miller / Jim Lee / Dave Mazzucchelli style, and he's been doing that at Marvel with Daredevil, and it's been really great. I like that kind of art, so he's got some of that here. Yeah. Yep.
Now, there's only one other thing that I wanted to point out in Image, and that's on page 69.
Okay, I was just going to briefly mention on page 68 this that was the anthologized series Miranda, which was originally collected in Island. And then it said collects Miranda number 1 to 5. I don't think those came out in single issues, though. Am I right about that? It was just an island?
I don't remember any single issue with the title Miranda.
Got it. Yeah, me neither. I don't think it was. So writer-artist Grim Wilkins, and it's sort of a fantasy-type series that they class in the Mobius and Frazetta sort of art realm. So you look at that cover, it's pretty great. And so
it is.
Yeah. So Miranda Volume 1 comes out in October.
So on that following page 69, and again, this is the last thing I have in the image section, Royalboiler, and not just because Royalboiler includes Royal,
That's
Royalboiler, and it's not the easiest thing to pronounce. Brandon Graham's, Brandon Graham's drawn out collection, which is a trade paperback, and says this spans Brandon Graham's 20-year career. It includes select cover work, illustrations, drawings from his work in animation, assorted art, along with pages from his sketchbook showcasing influences from all over the globe that combine into something uniquely personal. I really enjoy Brandon Graham's, his writing's fine, but his art, I think, is really standout.
Yeah.
It's unique. It's something that is different from anything else you've seen. And I think for this reason, Royalboiler, this trade paperback, stands out. So, I mean, you may not get complete stories, I don't know, in this trade paperback, but you can find apparently a variety of his art from different platforms. So if you're a Brandon Graham fan, if you really liked Multiple Warheads and King City and his work on Prophet, then this is something you should check out.
Yeah. And actually, maybe there's a few of you out there who are, and I've met a few of these type of folks who actually aren't necessarily that into the narrative in comics, but are just really into art books, because you have an artist sensibility. And I agree with you. Brandon Graham, whenever there's a Brandon Graham cover, I always recognize it, and I always think, wow, that's really cool. And that's such a different approach. And so a Brandon Graham art book is an intriguing prospect.
Do you have anything else in Image?
Nope. Then I go to the big dark horse on page 100. I don't know if you have anything else there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I go to the same page, and you want to describe this?
Yes, it is the return of the Umbrella Academy. This is Umbrella Academy Hotel Oblivion number 1, written by the Umbrella Academy team of Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba. I want to say 10 years ago, was it around, that the original Umbrella...
started?
Yeah,
Something
the original
like that,
Umbrella Academy Volume 1 and 2. And it took a little while for them all to come out. It's Gerard Way time, I like to think. Ba and his brother Fabio Moon seem to actually work at an incredibly fast pace. Anything that Gerard Way is involved in always seems to have its own kind of schedule. But anyway, Gerard Way stepped away from Young Animal, but if part of the reason was to return to the Umbrella Academy world, which if people don't know is sort of like a quirky superhero team-ish story that you really just kind of have to see to appreciate. And I think it was probably where Gerard Way most arrived on the scene as not just front of My Chemical Romance band, but really as a comics writer of distinction. And so they're coming back, and for people who know the story, it's sort of a family of weird heroes, sort of. It's similar to actually what we saw in Doom Patrol, which is just kind of a quirky bunch of characters brought together. And so we kind of see the next stages after Hargreave, who was sort of the heart and soul, I think, the sort of father figure of the team, has died, which is a spoiler for the end of Umbrella Academy Volume 2, and sort of what goes on there. So, yeah. And there's a Netflix series of Umbrella.
Yeah, there's that to look forward to.
Yes. So the timing, of course, is not just luck.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're coming back by and way with Umbrella Academy, another narrative arc. It does make you wonder, though, was Gerard Way working on this when he should have been keeping up in a more timely way with Doom Patrol? Yeah.
If there's a Netflix series coming, you you clear the schedule and you work on something to time with it, I guess. But I don't know. Did you like? I don't remember hearing you talk about Umbrella Academy, or if that was a big series for you.
I liked it. I read early issues. I haven't read everything with the Umbrella Academy, although that's something I have those issues, and I want to go back and just maybe in anticipation of Hotel Oblivion #1, maybe read all the Umbrella Academy as a way of reacquainting myself with the series.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're in for a treat. It's great fun, and hopefully it doesn't feel like homework at all.
Right, and plus Gabriel Ba is doing the art, so
oh my gosh,
that's
yes,
good.
Yeah. These preview pages are so fun. It's I forget who this. I don't know who this character. I remember who this character is, but basically it looks like a kid behind a wheel of a sports car doing some spy action. It's great. Yeah. Well, where are you next, Derek?
I don't have that much in Dark Horse this month, which is a little unusual because usually there are a lot of things that I wanted to that I want to spotlight on these preview shows in the Dark Horse section. I've only got 2 other solicits that I'd like to point out. I next go to page 111. Do you have anything before then?
No, actually, let's go there.
Yeah, and the thing about page 111, now this is issue number 6 of Black Hammer Age of Doom, that narrative arc. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that I think for the first time we have Rich Tommaso doing the art in a Black Hammer title.
Yeah.
Or am I forgetting something?
To my knowledge, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, which is unusual. And actually, Farrell Dalrymple does the cover B. So you have 2 phenomenal artists who are vastly different in terms of style doing the cover of Black Hammer Age of Doom #6. But I wanted to point this out just because Tommaso is doing the art, which is different.
I'm a little behind on Black Hammer, but not completely out of it. But I do know, and it actually says in the solicit, there's something about Colonel Weird, who's one of the the Black Hammer universe superheroes. Who, and so I think it's also a matter of the story fitting these artists, which Lemire has always done this well. Which is when he has guest artists, he always has the story. It makes sense with that artist's style. So.
Yeah. Another thing with Tommaso, we have to look forward in the next month or so to the new Dick Tracy from IDW.
Yep, and actually later on we'll see issue 2 of that solicited here. So
yes.
Yeah.
Where do you go next in the Dark Horse section?
Just briefly mention on 113 a collection of the Ring of the Nibelung, which I have in its 2 individual volumes. But it's if people know P. Craig Russell's art, P. Craig Russell of many great collaborations with Neil Gaiman, for instance. This is one of the seminal pieces of P. Craig Russell's art, a comics adaptation of the Wagner opera, I guess it is. But yeah, just a brief mention of that before moving on. Where are you next then after that?
Well, I want to maybe ask you a couple things about the Ring of the Nibelung.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now, now this is a paperback. Did they come out with a complete hardback edition? And there's a reason why I'm asking.
Oh, I don't know. What I have is hardbacks of the individual volumes. So I'm not sure if they did the hardback first.
Now, the reason I'm asking is because, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe more than 2 years ago, Dark Horse, unsolicited, sent me a couple, 2 or 3 of their books. None of which I had asked for, but apparently I had been on their mailing list.
Sure.
And one of these hardbound volumes of the Ring of the Nibelung was part of it. And I didn't get around to reading it. I kind of put it to the side. So I don't know if it's one of the 2 volumes, like you said you have, or if it is a hardbound collected. I'd have to fish it out to find out. So I was just curious. Okay.
Maybe this collection did come out in hardcover before, but I feel like it's an underappreciated artistic masterpiece, really, to be honest. And so I hope people do check it out in this instance.
Well, you mentioned adaptation. The word adaptation is going to come up a number of times on this episode, I can tell you, at least from my perspective, given what we find in the August previews. But the last thing I have in the Dark Horse section is not an adaptation, but this is on page 127, and it is volume 5 of the EC Archives Vault of Horror. And listeners of the Comics Alternative know that I'm a big fan of what now Dark Horse is doing with the EC Archives in its, I guess, latest incarnation. There have been a variety of other EC imprints throughout the years and decades, but several years ago, Gemstone began putting out these really nice editions of the EC Archives. Then it went briefly for 2 volumes over to, I think it was GC Press. And then Dark Horse picked up the mantle after that. And so they've done this for the past several years. And now we get the 5th volume of the Vault of Horror. And, I've been getting all of them. Whether I have the time to read them or not, again, the completist in me prods me forward to continue getting these EC archives because they are very nice volumes.
Yes, they are. Yeah, I agree. And if I were in your shoes, it'd be hard to resist.
Yeah.
Yeah. At EW next, or sorry, that's your transition. It was so good.
Yeah, no, that's all I have in Dark Horse. But now we next get to the DC section.
Oh yeah, okay, we can jump over.
And
there.
in the catalog proper, it's just a few pages, but it's kind of a cue to head on over to the DC catalog. And there actually are a few DC things that are worth mentioning. And my first title, and this is something else that we may discuss on our Halloween episode, is on page 3 of the DC catalog, Cursed Comics Cavalcade #1 by a variety of different writers and artists. So I guess this is going to be their Halloween issue where you take the DC universe, its various heroes, and put them in horrific settings.
Yep, featuring writers like James Tynion IV, Becky Cloonan, Brian Hill, Tim Seeley. So a lot of the stars of DC's writing stable right now, and then artists like Cloonan and Riley Rossmo and stuff. So
Mark
good stuff.
Buckingham, yeah.
Yeah. Mark Buckingham, yeah.
Where do you go in the DC catalog?
We'll skip over the few pages of the blank comics, which DC is selling on all blank comics, so you can make your own Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman comic. They happen to be charging the same cover price for blank pieces of paper, but I go next to page 18, which is Vertigo 25. I don't know if you have anything before that.
Yeah, actually a couple of things. Okay. On page 6, we get, I guess, the next title in the Sandman universe, and this is Cat Howard and Tom Fowler's Books of Magic #1.
I missed this.
Yeah, so that's on page 6.
Yes.
And then on the next page, 7, we get Dan Waters and Max Fierma and Sebastian Fierma's Lucifer #1. Now, we had an earlier Lucifer title from Vertigo, but I guess they're starting Lucifer over now and bringing it into the Sandman universe, which makes sense because that's where Lucifer began. And now I can't recall if we've ever discussed this, but are you a fan of the character Lucifer or the title Lucifer?
I think the last one may have actually been part of the DC Rebirth. I feel like they didn't do it at Vertigo. Actually, they did it within the main DC universe, which was
really? For some reason, I thought it was.
I
thought it was Vertigo.
We can check on that
because I think at DCB Service, when they would offer the Vertigo bundles, that was a part of it.
Oh yeah, you know what?
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. Actually, I'm thinking of Constantine.
Yeah,
both characters who I liked them when they would appear in whatever Sandman or whatever Vertigo stuff. But I've never been a huge follower of their own lines. I have them, I bought them on Comixology at one point. But I'm actually intrigued most of all by the brothers Fiumara art. I think Max and Sebastian are brothers, but the brothers Fiumara, who are artists I really like. So it should be cool to see them combined efforts there. But yeah, no, this continues the Sandman universe launches, and I'm going to be interested as these come out to see how they do.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Mike Carey's original Lucifer. Lucifer began in Sandman, but then when it spun out on its own title, Mike Carey wrote it for the longest time, and I absolutely loved that series. I liked, I guess, well enough the more recent incarnation with Vertigo. It was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't the Mike Carey stuff that I really loved. One of the things, though, that dampened me on Lucifer was, and I hate to say this, that damn television series, which to me was really disappointing. I was hoping for great things from that TV series. And then I saw the first episode, and I got the feeling that Lucifer was going to turn into a police procedural with the character Lucifer helping the police every single episode solve a crime. And I said, I think it may become that. I hope that it doesn't. I watched the second episode. I watched the third episode, and I'll be damned. That's what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it changed after the third episode, but after that third episode, they lost me. And so that kind of dampened my enthusiasm for the relaunched Lucifer. But I have another chance here with Waters and the Fiumara brothers. So
I got a question. Is there a great adaptation of a Vertigo series? I mean, I know the Preacher show has done okay, pretty good.
Yeah.
But I don't know if do you have a favorite? Which makes me, I just bring that up because, talking about adaptation, I just wonder about the adaptability of these kinds of series, and how well they actually do on other media.
The only other thing I can think of is iZombie on the CW.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that was okay. I watched several episodes of that, and it definitely had a CW feel to it, which doesn't necessarily jibe with the tone of television watching I usually enjoy. But it was okay. I thought it was watchable. But I only watched, I think, about 3 episodes of it and then kind of fell away from that.
Yeah.
Now, I go next in the DC catalog. I know you said you go to page, 18? Before that is another new title from Vertigo, and this is on page 14, Hexwives #1. This is written by Ben Blacker with art by Mirka Andolfo. And we talked about Mirka Andolfo last week when we looked at a series of #1 issues. She's doing Unnatural.
Yeah.
So I like the art. I have to tell you, I'm not a fan of Ben Blacker, so I don't know what to expect here. But it's a Vertigo title, so I'll, definitely check it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm hoping for good things from. I mean, I've been pulling for Vertigo for years.
Yeah.
When it's been in various slumps, or it seems to be like one long slump,
right.
Unfortunately. But I'm really hoping that these new Vertigo titles will turn into something, and to start getting a lot of attention in ways that other series that in many ways are the result of Vertigo, like the Burger books, like the Black Crown, like Aftershock, get attention in ways that they've been getting.
Yeah. Yeah. This, I am also enthusiastic about Andolfo's art. It's a Joelle Jones cover, which is great. You mentioned Exorsisters earlier, and then I'm a regular reader of Black Magic, and after a while, there's just enough pentagrams.
You can only take so many pentagrams.
I can only take so many pentagrams. And, mentally do the gymnastics to say this is doing something really different. And after a while, it's just like, okay, But I am excited about Vertigo coming back. Border Town #2 is solicited in this catalog as well, and that looks really cool. But that kind of brings me to what is on page 18. Are we ready for that, Derek?
Yes.
Okay, which is Vertigo 25, a celebration 25 years, a 400-page hardcover that has interviews with the likes of Garth Ennis and Glenn Fabry. I think that's how you say his name. Jamie Delano. Really your lineup of Vertigo All-Stars.
Kurt Busiek, Paul Levitz. Yeah.
Yes, Peter Milligan.
Matthias.
Let's just read the whole because each name sort of, got to mention that. Paul Jenkins, So, but really it's a celebration, as it says in the title, of all these years of Vertigo. And you're right. I mean, we root for Vertigo to come back because we attach so much significance to it. It even carries over to us rooting for Black Crown and for Burger books and things like that. And and I don't know if I guess I'm the kind of person who doesn't always want to spend forever looking back. No, that's not true. I love looking back, but I'm always filled with optimism about new things that are coming out and new manifestations. And so I'm not the kind of person who's like, please, Vertigo's got to return to its former glory. If it moves on and takes other forms, if those creative energies take other forms, I'm okay with that. But I do love the idea, and I do attach that kind of significance to those Vertigo series that I'm sure a lot of our listeners do. And so this celebration is something that I bet a lot of us will enjoy reading. Them talking about the back histories of a lot of these Vertigo series that we've grown to love.
Right. Now, this is a hardbound collection, and it's 400 pages.
Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like a ton of it doesn't seem like all reprint material. I mean, some of these interviews are maybe reprinted, but it does seem like a lot of new stuff curated by Scott Bryan Wilson. So yeah.
That was the last thing I had in the DC catalog.
I just want to briefly mention that Eternity Girl, which I know you talked to its creators, Meg Blasagio and Sonny Liu, is being collected now, as is the 12-issue run of Mr. Miracle. So I know that that's more in the superhero realm, but that's been a big award winner and critically lauded series and now being collected. So those are some upcoming collections to look forward to from DC.
You know, I have heard a lot about Mr. Miracle, and for that reason, it's on my to-read list. And as you know, I don't really keep up with the mainstream universes as much as I would like. I mean, there's just so much outside of the mainstream, linked to the podcast, that occupies my reading time, and I just don't have time. But I would love to read more. Mr. Miracle is one of those titles that is high on the list for me to actually get to.
Yeah. Actually, I had somebody ask me, because we're doing that Mother Box, New Gods podcast, about what I thought about Tom King's work on Mr. Miracle, and I would say it's clearly Tom King. This is, this has notes of what Kirby, and Kirby, I realized them as I'm reading it now, like put a lot of different possibilities, laid a lot of possibilities, seeded a lot of possibilities with Mr. Miracle as a character. And I feel like Tom King picks up on some of those notes, but it's a very clearly Tom King tone and vibe and set of themes and thematics, and which, if you've read Sheriff of Babylon, or if you've read even his Vision series or whatever, he just has a certain set of concerns that he circles back to, and a certain tone and style. And if you're with it, then you're gonna really like it. And I think some people who maybe don't like that as much, which they're few, but they're out there, may not be as big fans of Mr. Miracle and what he does with it. Yeah.
Well, his Vision series is also on my to read list.
Oh man,
I need to get to.
Yeah, you definitely should. I think. How about this, Derek? Before the end of the year, when you make your end of the year list, give at least Mr. Miracle or Vision a shot and see. I'd be curious what you thought.
Yeah. Now Vision is from a couple of years back, because I remember Kunka bringing that up as one of his favorites in our 2016 best of episode. So, but I do want to read that and Mr. Miracle. So
yeah.
I will. I'll get to it before the end of the year.
Not that you don't have any comics to read, Derek.
Right. So do you have anything else in the DC catalog?
No, I'm ready to go back to the main catalog in IDW if you are.
Okay, yes. IDW, I don't begin in IDW until page 165.
I just want to mention at the beginning of IDW that they're announcing this Star Wars Adventures Tales from Vader's Castle, only because, we don't talk a lot about like Star Wars or even a lot of the licensed work in general, but only because I just note that for a long time, Marvel still publishes the Star Wars license and line, but that these Star Wars adventures, which I think are more for kids, more for a younger audience, that IDW has been doing, has done so well that it's expanded now to a multi-series thing where there's this 5-week event miniseries. And I just say that because I just think IDW has done so well with a certain kind of adaptation that Disney doesn't even want to have Marvel do it. Disney has IDW doing it with a lot of these really Disney properties, which I think is just an interesting thing to say about IDW. We don't talk much about the adaptation work or the licensed stuff, but I just think that there's something that IDW is doing with these licenses that is worth noting and remarkable. So, but yeah, I'm excited about 165. Is that where you said?
Yeah, okay. And this is something that we've actually discussed, the first issue of this, and I think Gene was the co-host on that episode. And this is Mike Carey and Peter Gross's The Highest House. One of the things that drew me to the Highest House is, the aforementioned Mike Carey. I was talking earlier about Lucifer. I like Carey's writing, but the team of Gross and Carey is what we had with The Unwritten, which is a Vertigo series I really loved. So then they teamed up again for this IDW title, The Highest House. Very intriguing. And one of the things that struck me about this series is that each issue would come in, I guess, more of a European album-sized issue.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that this trade paperback is going to be the same size as well. So I'm glad to see, and it says oversized collection. So I'm glad to see that the series now is about to wrap up and it's going to be collected. I haven't kept up with the Highest House since the first couple of issues. Again, just because there's so much to read and keep up with on a weekly or even a daily basis with the podcast now. But yeah, now that this is being collected, I will definitely get this and read everything.
Yeah. I think I read the first maybe 3 issues of the series. And I have to admit, I was disoriented at the beginning, and I knew that if I read more, it would get its sea legs. But really what attracted me to this series, in addition to liking Carey and Gross's Unwritten, is, and this is a carryover from Unwritten as well, is the cover art. And Yuko Shimizu, who's a well-known Japanese artist, she makes great covers.
Also working on the Unwritten.
Yes, that's right.
For the Unwritten covers, yeah.
So I was very drawn to those covers as art pieces. But yeah, I think maybe the collection is a chance for me to finish up that series as well.
Now, I go 2 pages after that to 167, and there are a couple things there definitely worth mentioning.
Me too. Do you want to start? Well, yeah. Do you want to start us off with Mattéo?
Yes, and here we have Mattéo, Book 1, 1914 through 1915. And this is by Jean-Pierre Gebras. And if that name sounds familiar, then you probably listened to our Eurocomic series. We talked about, Edward and I, a while back, talked about not only Flight of the Raven, but also The Reprieve, which was its follow-up. So now we get another book or another title from Gebras. And so this is book 1. I don't know how many there are going to be, maybe a book 2 at least. So this is coming out from Dean Mullaney's Eurocomics imprint, which is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's something that I'm hoping that Pascal and I can talk on a future episode. I think this comes out in December. The other thing on that page that's definitely worth mentioning is from another imprint at IDW, Yo Books, our friend Craig Yo, whom we will have on the show soon for another interview. Yep. I know he's the most interviewed subject we've had on the Comics Alternative. He continues to be, and he's going to be on, I don't know, maybe in the next month or so, Paul, to talk about Super Weird Heroes 2 and then Super Patriotic Heroes. 2 books that have either just come out or are about to come out. But this book on page 167 that's being solicited is The Great Treasury of Christmas Comic Book Stories. And so this includes pieces from such writers as Walt Kelly, Richard Scarry, John Stanley, Klaus Nordling, and more. So this is interesting. A lot of people, I think, know Craig Yo for his offbeat, strange, sometimes even kinky stuff that he collects and puts out. But, there is a softer side to Craig Yo, and not just as a person, because, I know him. He's a really good friend. I see him whenever I can at various cons. But also in the kind of books that he puts out. So he has put out books that are not weird, that are not strange or twisted, that are not kinky. And this is one example of those.
Yeah. I mean, Craig Yo is a lover of comics. And if you love comics, it's hard not to love Craig Yo, just because, yeah, this stuff was there. I mean, Richard Scarry, Walt Kelly. I mean, how, and Christmas, Christmas comics, it's in the archives and it's part of comics history. And if it's there, Craig Yo is going to appreciate it, assemble it for us, and present it. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm hopeful that I can talk as often as he's been on the show. I've never had the honor of talking to him, so it would be fun.
It's fun. It is. Yeah. Now, on that next page is solicited the next issue of Craig's Haunted Horror, and this is issue number 36. Wow, 36. And they don't have the cover of issue 36, but what they do have is I guess the first page of one of the stories in issues number 36, the horror heads. And it's just fun. I mean, this is the typical kind of stuff that Craig comes out with, or that he finds and then collects. You have a guy who's out, it looks like, in this winter landscape on a mountain somewhere, and surrounding him are these heads that are frowning and look threatening. Those are, I guess, the horror heads. And anytime you have a disembodied head in any kind of narrative, whether it be a comic or television or what have you, you know that hilarity is going to ensue.
Yep. 48 putrid pages, it tells us.
That's right. And, just as an aside, I hang out with Craig at Heroes Con every year when he's there, and I'm there. Hung out with him a lot this year, and he's going to continue on with Haunted Horror. Unfortunately, I think he's going to be ending, if he hasn't already, Weird Love.
Okay.
And the reason is he felt that he had basically almost tapped out of the kind of strange, twisted, depending on how you read it, romance stories that he could discover. Although he did say that with horror, there seems to be a much deeper well. And there's a longer history with that as well. So, and plus, Haunted Horror really sells. Weird Love doesn't as much. So it's unfortunate, because I really like Weird Love. But Haunted Horror we were going to have for a while, it seems.
Yeah. 171 is where I go next.
Me too.
Okay. Lodger number 1 by David and Maria Lapham. And of course, people know David Lapham from Stray Bullets, which oddly is not mentioned on this page. But I guess it's IDW. But this is from Black Crown, and it's the Lapham team working on a new series. Unsurprisingly, it involves murder. And
really?
And
wow, that's so out of character for David Lapham.
That's right. It says that it's dark, grimy, psychological thriller.
Wow, he's stretching it.
That's right. But probably like me, a lot of people who are big fans of Stray Bullets will probably be excited to see Lapham. And Stray Bullets lived at Image for a while, or has been actually, and now this is now a new series at Black Crown. So that should be cool to see.
Yeah. And we've talked about Black Crown titles on the podcast before, most recently last week with Euthanauts.
That's right.
And even though for the most part, I guess overall, I like what Black Crown is doing, I have to say that Lodger number 1 is the one I'm most excited about so far, even given Assassinistas with Gilbert Hernandez doing the art. He was doing the art. He wasn't doing the writing. I think Tini Howard did a fine job with the writing.
Yeah.
And I love Gilbert Hernandez's work, but David Lapham, along with, I guess, his wife Maria, are writing Lodger number 1. Lapham is doing the art. And so this just strikes me as something that is even more exciting.
It's a big get. I mean, it's a very symbolic, acquisition, sort of. To acquisitions, like, that sounds too businessy. These are human beings. These are creatives who, but I think it's a big thing, because I mean, it's going to be in black and white. So it's clearly like Black Crown saying we're about the creators. We're about these specific creators that are, have this certain, pedigree and vibe, and doing letting them do what they do. And, I think Lapham is one of those hallmark figures in that vein of work. So it's a big deal. Yeah.
Now, the one other thing I have in IDW, and you probably are going to highlight the same thing, is on page 174.
Top and bottom? Top or bottom?
Well, the bottom. I mean, we've already mentioned the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The Tempest, when the first issue was solicited.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, this is something worth checking out. But underneath, on the bottom of page 174, is something that, I don't know, maybe you and Gwen can discuss on a Young Reader show.
Yes.
Supers, book 1. And this is by Frédéric Mapome, with art by, I don't know if he pronounced it David or Dawid. It's Dawid. But I don't know if the W is pronounced like a V in this case.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it seems interesting. And this is the winner of the Youth Award from the ACBD, which is the French Association of Comics Critics. So it's
looks good.
It's got to be worth checking out. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good. It's 112 pages, sort of typical European thing. But it's gotten a lot of good press, I think, because it's combination of sort of like kid classroom, school life things and sort of superhero type tension or some kind of superpowers thing. But I like this art. It's small, but it's reproduced there, and David, whatever, that art looks really great. So I'm looking forward to Supers from Top Shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do
you have anything else in IDW?
Nope. Okay. Yeah. Where do you go next?
Well, we have the Dynamite section, and there's often not much in Dynamite that I'm overly excited about. I'm not the biggest guy in terms of licensed properties, although there are 2 solicits in the Dynamite section that I wanted to mention, and the first one is on page 205.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and we can briefly mention then Lone Ranger #1, Mark Russell is writing that. That sounds interesting. And then there's a new Miss Fury reboot. But yeah, let's go with you. Where are we going?
I thought about that Lone Ranger #1, and I think that's where the Dynamite section begins. As a kid, I was a gigantic fan of the Lone Ranger. I had recordings of the old radio show. I loved to watch the television series. I have to say that the comic book Lone Ranger hasn't really thrilled me, and I know Dynamite has. I mean, it's them coming back to the well again to kind of see if they can do something with Lone Ranger. And so I guess I wasn't overly excited this time around. But on page 205, something that I think is definitely worth mentioning for, I think, a variety of reasons. This is the hardcover collection of, I guess, the most recent series that has wrapped up with their James Bond titles, James Bond, The Body. So this is written by Alice Cott with art by Luca Casaguida and Antonio Fuso and Rafa Lobosco. Now, it's worth mentioning, because it's another hardbound collection of a James Bond narrative arc, which they've been doing a lot over the past couple of years in Dynamite. This is also worth mentioning because, and we can tease this now, Paul, next week on our Wednesday regular review show, you and I are going to devote an entire episode to what Dynamite has been doing with the James Bond properties.
That's right. It's James Bond time.
That's right. Bond. James Bond is what we're going to be discussing. And I don't know if we'll get around to talking about The Body, because I think we had planned primarily to talk about the series that have been collected. If I get the time, I may try to fish out some issues of The Body just to get a sense of what's going on, because I haven't read any of what Cott has done with James Bond here. But next week, we will be talking about all James Bond, all the episode.
That's right. Look forward to that, listeners.
Now, the only other thing I have in Dynamite is on page 209.
Oh, yeah. Let's go there, because I'm not until Boom on 218.
Yeah, and here we have what seems to be finally. I mean, I'm surprised it wasn't collected sooner. I'd almost forgotten about it. Will Eisner's The Spirit Corpse Makers. And this is something that began maybe a year and a half ago. Francesco Francavilla does the art, which really stands out. I mean, Francavilla is great when it comes to that kind of darker feel, whether it be horror or noir. And, we have The Spirit here, so there definitely should be a noir, dark tone to the art, which we get with Francavilla. But it seems like it took the Corpse Makers a while to wrap up. I remember talking about the first 1 or 2 issues during an episode we did maybe 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, for Will Eisner Week. I'll have to go back and look at the past episodes. But I think when Kunka and I, because what we were doing, we were looking at post-Eisner death uses of the Spirit. And I think Corpse Makers had just started with their first 1 or 2 issues. And so we read that and included that toward the tail end of our discussion. But it just seems like it's been a long time in coming. I mean, this is going to be a hardcover, so it hasn't been collected yet. But I guess it was just a slower series to come to terms than expected.
Yeah, yeah. And Frank Olivier is one of those artists who is so good, they're worth waiting for.
Yes, definitely worth the wait.
Yeah, it does take away some of the momentum of the story. I remember reading I think I read the first one or two issues as well. So, yeah, it's perfect. His art style, and even his storytelling, he is a writer as well, is perfect for the spirit. So it should be fun. It should be fun to see it all together.
So you say, where do you go first in the Boom section?
Well, the second title, the first one is in Adventure Time Season 11, but the second title is Sparrowhawk #1, written by Delilah Dawson, illustrated by Matthias Basla. Yeah, this is the pitch is Teen Victorian Fairy Fight Club.
Boy, how many titles and genres can you squeeze into that?
I know. I was going to say another Teen Victorian Fairy Fight Club. Come on. Talk about sameness. No.
Geez, the market is so saturated with Teen Victorian Fairy Fight Club.
Every time you turn around, another Teen Victorian Fairy Fight Club. No, this actually, it's not so much that. I think none of those 4 or 5 things are really necessarily my wheelhouse, but this art that they have here from Basla, it looks great, and no word balloons. I'm not sure what the story is going to play out like, but Boom is spotlighting this series, and with good reason. Some of the recent Boom series where they've just tried to mix things up a little bit and had something that is a real mashup of genres, and really with some great creative force behind it. Delilah Dawson has written Hellboy stuff and Star Wars stuff, but yeah, it has been good. And the Solid and Ahmed series recently, I'm blanking on the title, and Coda and things like that. I've liked the things that Boom has been coming out with in its individual series. It doesn't, when we were talking about that earlier, the sameness of some of that Image stuff, I feel like this is stuff that's always a bit of a departure, and I respect Boom for doing that. So I like this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, actually, 2 pages before that, I wanted to mention, maybe just in passing.
Oh, yeah.
This is on 216, Adventure Time Season 11, #1.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know until reading, excuse me, I didn't know until reading the solicit that the television series, after Season 10 wraps up this fall, will be ending. So we won't have any more Adventure Time. So apparently, this is not unusual in comics, where the title in comics basically picks up where the television series left off. I mean, we got that with Buffy, I think most memorable. But now we get Season 11 with Adventure Time.
Yeah.
And the thing that's worth mentioning is that our friend Sonny Liu is the writer of this first issue.
I'm sorry I passed this over. I wrote it down, and then I when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, another Adventure Time. I forgot why. I'd forgotten why I was so excited about it. But yeah, Sonny Liu writing. And Adventure Time always has great covers and great artists on it. But yes, your friend and mine, Sonny Liu, who we love.
Yes.
Yeah.
After that, I go to page 222 in the Boom section. Do you have anything before that?
I just want to mention that the 220 has a original graphic novel, Hex Vet, which is in training, and we've been talking about all the Hex stuff, but in this case, it's a original graphic novel for kids that is about witches who are vets for like dragons and stuff. So enough said about that. Let's go to 222.
Written and drawn by Sam Davies.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I should have mentioned Sam Davies, of course. Yeah.
And also there's another Halloween title, The Backstagers Halloween Intermission #1. So that may be something to discuss on the Halloween show. But on page 222, something that looked interesting, and I'm not familiar with this creator, Natalie Nurigat. I moved to Los Angeles to work in animation, and that's the title. I moved to Los Angeles to work in animation. And from the solicit, that title more or less tells you what the book is about. Where she moved, it's an autobiographical account about someone who moves to Los Angeles and who works in animation. And it's about her acclimating to that area in that industry. So it seems interesting. I don't know if I'll get this, but it's definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, it does look good. Natalie Nurigat, I think, has I'm not sure what has done. I think different things, nothing that hugely jumps out, but I do see her on Twitter, and she's got cool looking art, and this looks like very cool art too. So yeah, no surprise, actually has done some animation work as well.
Now, the last thing I have in the Boom section is a couple of pages later on 224. And, I wouldn't necessarily put Alejandro Jodorowsky and Boom Studios together. Although this is an archaic title. But we do get the two together. We have a new work, or at least in English, from Jodorowsky, illustrated by Jose Landron, The Sons of El Topo, Volume 1, Cain. Now, I am not familiar with Jodorowsky's film El Topo, but apparently this is a follow-up to this. The Sons of El Topo. Are you familiar with Jodorowsky's films, in particular El Topo?
Nope, only the comic stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, on the current Eurocomic show, which will have gone up at the beginning of this week when the show comes out, Pascal and I talk about Moonface, which came out just recently from Humanoids, which is a Jodorowsky title. It's wild. It really is. It's definitely worth reading. Book does the art. But here we have Ledron. I don't know if I've seen anything that Ledron has done. But this is by Jodorowsky, so that caught my attention.
Yeah. Looks interesting. I have one more at Boom. I don't know if you have anything else.
What is it?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Just
on page 238, Giant Days early registration, and this collects. So John Allison, the writer of Giant Days and also the creator of Bad Machinery, originally introduced these characters himself with his own art, I think on the web, if I'm not mistaken. So this collects that early stuff before the sort of proper Giant Days Boom series, which down beneath that you can see it's on issue 43, which is an achievement, these days. But John Allison's great sense of humor, and I enjoy his art as well from seeing it in Bad Machinery. So this collects those kind of early Giant Days, pre the artists that they've had, Lissa Treyman and Max Aaron. Max Aaron is now the current, has been for most of it's the series now, the artist on Giant Days, also the artist of my Twitter avatar. So Max Aaron is great. There you
go. Wow.
Yeah. But this Giant Days early registration for fellow Giant Days fans, I think they're gonna want to get this.
And you and Gwen have discussed Allison's work on the Young Reader series before, correct?
Maybe Gwen did, and it may have been before my time. I
remember hearing somebody on the Young Reader show talking about Allison's work.
Yeah.
And I thought it was with you. Maybe it was a show where you looked at a variety of different titles, like nominees for this or that.
Actually, I've brought up Giant Days as one of my favorites of the year, so it may have been then.
That may have been in one of your end of the year episodes.
Yeah. I love that series.
Now, the next thing I have in the previews catalog is in the back half when we get to, I guess, what some people call the green section.
Yes.
Smaller publishers.
Let's go there. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you and I begin in this section on the same page, 252.
Yeah. Although it's a little sad because I'm looking at Run, book 1, but it's been announced that that's delayed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In fact, they're holding it off for a year.
Get out of here.
Yeah, you can imagine why. So
you can tell I don't keep up with comic news like I should.
I think part of the reason is that I don't know if it was not quite done. I think some of the art was not quite done. But also, they didn't want to just wait a few months because they want to do the book tour. And John Lewis is a little bit busy. There's something going on for the next
called the midterm election.
Yeah. Yes, right. So they wanted him to be able to promote the book without having to worry. And it actually would have been sort of fortuitous timing, not luck, for it to have come out when it is to correspond with the midterms. But of course, he's going to be busy on the road. So they wanted him to be able to promote the book with the midterms behind him, I think. So they're holding it off for a while. Okay. Yeah.
Well, if you remember in our conversation with Nate Powell from several weeks ago, we asked him about Run.
Yeah.
And his work on that. So he was telling us a little bit about that. It's unfortunate that they're holding off on it, but it's understandable.
Yeah, we should. And sorry, I failed to mention this. This is, of course, the follow-up series to March, which is Run and about John Lewis's, his political career as he became member of Congress and all that stuff. And although a different publisher. That's right. I forget.
Not Top Shelf.
Not
this
Top Shelf.
is Abrams comics art.
Sure.
So while you're waiting for Run Book 1 to come out in another year, I guess you can satisfy yourself with another Abrams comic arts title, 1010, The Art of Hergé. And this is coming out in soft cover edition. I got a hardbound edition. In fact, it was one of those, again, that I didn't even ask for, but Abrams just sent it to me. So I got the hardbound of this, but it's coming out, and it's really nice. But this is coming out in soft cover now. So if you're a Hergé fan, that's definitely for you.
Or if you're like me, you like Tintin from your childhood, but you have much to learn about Hergé and the clear line style and so on, then this might be a good introduction education.
After that, I go to page 258.
Let's go.
And this is in the Adhouse book section. I think the only contribution from Adhouse. And this is Pat Palermo's Live Work number 2. Now, listeners of the podcast will remember that several months ago, I actually had Pat Palermo on the show to talk about the first issue of Live Work. I absolutely loved that first issue. It's one of the standouts of the year so far for me. And we're just a little past, I guess, halfway through the year. But it's one of my favorites of this year. And so I'm really looking forward to issue number 2 of this series. And Adhouse has been doing more of these single issues of series instead of, or in addition to doing the books that they do. But I'm glad that they're doing that. And Live Work is a great example of what they can do.
Yeah. Go Adhouse. Everything Adhouse does is really been great. Yeah.
Then after that, we get to the Aftershock section, and there are 3 new number 1s with Aftershock. There's Dead Kings number 1 by Steve Orlando and Matthew Dow Smith. There's The Last Space Race by Peter Calloway and Alex Shabeo. And then there's Lollipop Kids, number 1 from Adam and Adian Glass and Diego Yapur. I don't know if I'm going to read any of these 3, but I wanted to point them out in light of the previous conversations you and I have had about these kind of comics, from various publishers or even imprints, like Burger Books and Black Crown. But also a few weeks ago, you and I were discussing the potential saturation of the market. And wondering if more new titles from these smaller publishers, in other words, non-mainstream, doing in many ways kind of the same things that we see with Vertigo, right? Or with Image. How long could this go on for? Is there going to be enough market share there for them to continue coming out with these new titles? And Aftershock seems to come out with more and more new titles to where I don't even keep up anymore because I feel that it would be debilitating. Yeah.
I have a thought, and I hope this doesn't come across as an insult to anybody. I've actually given a lot of these Aftershock titles a shot, and some of them have been really intriguing. I think Baby Teeth is interesting, but Peter Calloway, the writer of The Last Space Race, comes over from TV, where he's worked on Cloak and Dagger and Legion and stuff like that, and that's just reminded me that one of the thoughts of where this goes is that some creators, and maybe some of that comes off onto the publisher, are piloting stories that may wind up TV shows or something like that, in the Mark Millar fashion. And that makes me even less interested I don't want to read TV spec scripts turned into comic books, and I'm not saying that these specific titles are that, but because some of this is about market viability, right? And so if everybody's trying to be Walking Dead, and that's how you become market viable in comics, it's just kind of like, it's just kind of sad for me as a reflection of comics and where comics are at. So, and then the Lollipop Kids on page 262, I saw this title, which is, the cover, which is a Robert Hack cover, and I was like, wow, this looks great. And then I saw that there's like these monster hands on the Central Park sign, and I was like, more of the same. It looked really interesting for a minute when it was a girl holding hands with a mom walking through Central Park, of course. And then there's got to be a monster, and then I was like, I'm out. So maybe we'll give some of these a shot, and I'm always listening for when critics and writers find one of these Aftershock books that they like, but otherwise I probably will pass it by.
Yeah, the last Aftershock book that we discussed on the Comics Alternative was the Garth Ennis horror title.
That's right.
What was it? Walk Through
Hell. Walk Through Hell.
Walk Through Hell, yes,
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Which is pretty good, that first issue.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Okay, so I next go to page 270. This is right after Aftershock.
Okay.
And remember I said earlier that the word adaptation would come up a number of times in this episode?
Yeah.
This is one of those occasions. Actually, on this page and from two different publishers, we have two different examples that seem quite different of adaptation. The first one, and this is at the top of page 270, and this is from Comics, AH Comics. I don't know these guys. I haven't heard of them before. Have you?
Mm-mm.
Okay. This is an adaptation of Mark Twain's Niagara book, and it says Mark Twain's Niagara, Book 1. And so this takes Twain's Niagara adventures and turns it into an original graphic novel. It says it's based on the short story Niagara, written by Mark Twain in the 1860s. And not only am I a fan of comics adaptations, but I'm in particular a big fan of comics adaptations with certain writers. I think Mark Twain, Herman Melville, and Edgar Allan Poe are probably the most prominent. So I'm excited about this new book from Comics, Mark Twain's Niagara, Book 1. I'm also intrigued by what appears at the bottom of page 270, and this is an adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar, and this is from Ahoy Comics, which we have heard about, right? Because this is the new publisher. I think it was last month that they first launched, and Grant Morrison is behind Ahoy Comics. But they have a new title coming out, I guess, just in time for Halloween, at least I hope. Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror #1. And apparently this is going to take some classic Poe stories and give them weird twists with some new stories or some new perspectives. So the way they describe it is, it says Edgar Allan Poe mangles classic tales and brand new stories in the cross between drunk history and tales from the crypt. So it looks interesting, and I say it's a different kind of adaptation. It seems that the Mark Twain Niagara book is more, I guess you could say, faithful to the original, whereas what we have with Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror #1 is using, I guess, Poe's original narratives as a jumping off point, but then doing something very different with them. And, I think both examples of adaptation are viable. I like both. Something doesn't have to be faithful to be successful. Something doesn't have to be entirely unique. A different take, a weird take on the original to be successful. I think there's a place for both. And here we have an example of both of those impulses. Yeah. Also mentioned on this page is Captain Ginger #1, which is another Ahoy new series that's starting up. I note that in both of these cases, Captain Ginger has a text piece by Grant Morrison, and the Snifter of Terror, the Poe book, has a short story by Mark Russell and Peter Snaberg, which people might know from Starman. I don't know how to say his last name. Snaberg with J's in it. But those are some big name creators, but they're doing extras, I guess. And so I just Shannon Wheeler's doing one as well.
That's right. So I do think that they're it'll be nice to see those pieces, and if you lend your considerable heft, if you're somebody like Grant Morrison, to a series or to a publisher, so that other creators like Stuart Moore and June Brigman and stuff like that can really get some more note for their work. That's cool. That's cool with me. But just this is the beginning of the Ahoy comics that we've seen announced really coming out. Yeah.
I go next to page 282. Do you have anything before then?
No, let's go there.
Okay, and the bottom of that page is by a publisher that I haven't really heard much of. I heard about in the past, Animal Media Group, and this is Queen of Kenosha. This is written by Howard Shapiro with art by Erica Chan. And Howard Shapiro is actually someone whom we have interviewed in the past. I don't know, I think about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, Gwen and I interviewed Howard about his series of hockey books.
Okay.
And Howard emailed me last month, and I kind of overlooked that email until recently, and he was alerting me to, because he keeps in touch via social media. He's a really nice guy. But he alerted me to this new title, but it didn't click until I saw this solicit in the August Previews catalog. It's like, oh my God, this is what Shapiro was telling me about. So it's a coming of age story. It says a first installment of the Thin Line trilogy. Fiercely independent Nina Overstreet has an axe to grind, a talented singer-songwriter slogging her way through the burgeoning Greenwich Village folk music scene of 1963. The Queen of Kenosha, Wisconsin, realizes the standing on the cusp of stardom gets her little respect and barely a cup of coffee in New York City. But eventually the fame comes. And so this is interesting. I know Howard Shapiro's work in terms of sports writing, hockey in particular. So this is a different side of him. I'm definitely interested in checking this out.
Yeah, sounds interesting. I'm not until 302, so I don't know if you have anything before that.
Well, on 286 from Attaboy, the next issue of High Fructose magazine is coming out. And I can't remember the artist who's on the cover here, but he's someone that I absolutely love. And I met briefly a couple of years ago at SPX. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name. So I wanted to mention that. And you say, what page now?
302, Black Mask.
Okay.
So at Black Mask, there's the start of a new series written by the aforementioned Magdalene Visaggio and illustrated by Becca Farrow. It's called Sex, Death, Revolution #1. And yeah, it's I'll read this. It says, life is a story. Hers is being rewritten. Still reeling from the sudden collapse of her coven. There's witches again. Manhattanite sorceress Esperanza tries to rebuild. But everything in her life, maybe not witches, sorceress, everything in her life is saying she's done and said things that never happened, terrible things. Before she knows it, she's become someone entirely different, someone she used to be once upon a time. Life is full of this urban fantasy from Magdalene Visaggio and artist Becca Farrow. It's a cool looking cover. I slagged on Black Mask and Aftershock, but I actually really like a lot of these titles, and whenever they're new, especially, they kind of intrigue me. So this one looks interesting.
Wow. So this episode is going to be notable for the number of times we mention witch-related titles and the number of times we mention adaptations, I think.
That's right.
So witches and adaptations.
There's going to be a witch adaptation somewhere coming.
Yeah.
But it is, as you said, the run-up to Halloween, so maybe that's part of it.
I go next to 315.
So you're skipping Boundless, is what you're saying?
Yes. And in fact, there's one, okay, I have to point out, there's one image, and I know you're joking there, in the Boundless section that seem to be even more over the top than they usually do. And this is on page 310. The cover of Jungle Fantasy Secrets #3. Okay. We usually get, cleavage, if not outright breast shots from Boundless. This is a shot from the other end, and you have a woman standing over another, and her rear is in essence right in our faces. And I had to do a double take on that.
You said even more over the top, and I was flipping through the pages. I was like, which one, Derek? They're all
yeah, they are.
ludicrous.
But I mean, this one's a little unusual because we usually don't get that many rear shots. It's usually the frontal stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to privilege.
Yeah. I'm not trying to judge anybody, but teach their own. But seriously.
Yeah. But I think much more toned down on page 315.
Sure.
Now, were you a fan of Maggie Thrash's Honor Girl?
No, yeah. You know what? Not until you just asked me just now. I kept thinking that Honor Girl was a book that was on my list to read, and I realized I totally read it. I picked it up from the library, and I loved it. I thought it was really good. So I'm excited about Lost Soul, Be at Peace, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah, this is a memoir of hers, and so this is coming out from Candlewick, which I think it's the publisher that put out Honor Girl. So something else to look at, and possibly something you and Gwen can check out on a future Young Reader show.
I'd love that. Apologies to listeners. It's weird to do it at this point in the episode, but for the delay. Gwen and I have both had various life and work issues that have kept us from being able to record. We're still in touch and eager, so it's not canceled at all. We're just having to adjust for each other's schedule a little bit through this weird summer. But
you took a break in July. You're going to be back in August, right?
That's right. We're coming back strong.
On page 319 is something that I'm looking forward to. It's another title from Conundrum Press, Phlegm. This is by Rebecca Rosen, and I've been liking everything really that Conundrum's done over the past several years, but lately I've been getting more excited about their titles. I'm actually planning on having Rebecca Rosen on the podcast for an interview when this book comes out. So. Looking forward to that.
Yes, it's Julia meets a group of radical feminist performance artists in Brussels. She's convinced by their perspective and their countercultural lifestyle. But has she found her tribe? I love that setup. People who have hung around various kinds of radicals of various kinds who feel so much affinity and then also a little bit trepidation will sympathize, I imagine, with this experience.
Yeah.
Where do you go next from there?
I don't have anything until Fantagraphics.
Okay. I just note, and this happens all the time, but just that Drawn and Quarterly doesn't have a lot of new stuff, but it just is rebroadcasting all this Tatsumi work that every time I see those covers, I'm just realize how important that work was for me. But no, me too. I have nothing specifically huge to mark. It just, No, let's go to Fantagraphics.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, there's nothing new in Drawn and Quarterly, not even one title, which struck me as a little different. But you're right. They do have a lot of resolicits, in particular the Yoshihiro Tatsumi and Shigeru Mizuki books, which are good. Not only the Hitler, but all the Showa titles.
Sure.
That reminds me when Shay and I guess almost 2 years ago now, when we discussed Mizuki's Hitler, the day that episode came out was actually the day that Mizuki died.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was bad timing on our part, but or maybe good timing.
Maybe good. Yeah, you got to talk about it the week after, I believe. And
although at the time Kanka emailed me that morning and said, "Okay, so you guys killed Mizuki." It's like, thanks, Andy. Thanks.
Good old Andy Kanka.
Okay, but Fantagraphics does have a number of new titles coming out.
Gotta love.
And I'm in particular looking at page 335.
Okay.
We have the third Fanta Bukowski book from Noah Van Sciver, which is good. This is called A Perfect Failure. We have the next issue, number 6, in the latest incarnation of Love and Rockets, which, of course, we're always excited about in the comics alternative.
Yes.
And it looks like Luba's on the cover. That's Luba, isn't it?
I think so.
The gray hair.
Yeah.
Good, yeah. And then finally, we have something that has been announced for quite a while. This is Kramer's Ergo number 10. I thought that this was solicited earlier. Am I mistaken there, or did I just hear about it?
I feel like it's been solicited forever. I've had it on pre-order forever from Fantagraphics. So
okay, so it has been solicited. Maybe they just delayed it, or maybe this is a resolicit. But it's in the midst of new titles, so that's one of the things that made me wonder.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we've just seen it solicited, announced, whatever. I mean, I've seen that cover a bajillion times elsewhere, but this maybe it hasn't been in previews until now. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have at the bottom of that page a couple of titles in Fantagraphics, limited edition, Underground in print. Now, one that I'm particularly interested in is the Crumb Compendium, and Carl Richter is pulling this together. So that's interesting. The other title in the Underground limited edition series is Jim Osborne, The Black Prince of the Underground, and this seems to be more of a history biography, with, of course, some a good amount of sampling art.
Yeah.
So always good things coming from Fanta.
Yeah, and FU. I mean,
and FU, yeah.
I mean from FU.
Fantagraphics Underground.
Not directed at you, Derek.
Yes.
Yeah. Good things from Fanta all the time, and good things from First Second all the time, which is where I go.
Yeah, they're next.
Page. Yeah.
What are you specifically looking at with the new First Second books?
Well, we've been looking forward to Jason Walz's last pick, Volume 1, which is coming out. It's Alien Abductions Left Behind, kids younger than 16 and older than 65. So it's an interesting. I wonder if it's interesting reflecting on sort of like the sort of hollowing out of the center in certain communities where you're left really with kids and old folks. But anyway, this one involves aliens. So it's the start of a new series from Jason Waltz that looks good. And also Science Comics The Brain, written by Tori Wolcott and art by Alex Grodin. And another installment in the Science Comics series. And this one about, I'm intrigued to learn more about the brain. I learned so much about everything that Science Comics covers. And this is the next one.
Yeah, that's just an incredible series. And I think last month, didn't we see Andy Hirsch's Trees being solicited?
That's right.
Yeah.
We talked about that. Yeah.
Right. So these Science Comics are just wonderful, and we have this as a regular series. It's almost like every month or at least every other month.
Yeah.
We have a new Science Comics title coming out from First Second. Another one of their series, Secret Coders, Jen Lewin Yang and Mike Holmes, we have the 6th volume that's being solicited.
6th and last volume, actually.
I want to go back and read all of them after this 6th one comes out, because I read the first one I really liked, but after that, I didn't keep up with. And I know that you and Gwen have discussed these in the past.
Yeah, Gwen and Andy did, I think, one of the early volumes. And actually, my daughter and wife and I read these religiously. We've reread, given them away as gifts. Friends who are programmers, giving it to them to, show their kids the kind of thinking that they do early on, at least the rudiments of it. And this is one to buy, to recommend, to give as, a presence under the whatever reason, holiday you have, birthdays, to give as gifts, because I think it's fun, informative, and I can't say enough good things about Secret Coders.
Right. And then also at the bottom of page 336 is solicited, this is a featured item, Tilly Walden's On a Sunbeam. Now, this is a webcomic. I'm assuming it's still up. Maybe I haven't checked lately, but it's a webcomic that Sean and I discussed on a past webcomics episode at least a couple of years ago. And it's an intriguing story. In many ways, it's characteristic of Tilly Walden's writing, I think, outside of Spinning, which you and I discussed, and that's a straight-out memoir. A lot of Tilly Walden's comics have this fantastical feel to them, where you have these giant cats, you have some spaceships. It's not too fantastic or science fiction-y. I think that sometimes those fantastical elements are subtly put in. And On a Sunbeam, I don't know if you've read the webcomic, but you have something very similar going on as with some of our other works. Yeah,
and as of now, it's still on the web, so
cool.
Who knows? When the book comes out, it might be taken down, so it might be a good time to catch up on it on the web. I just got to say, on a Sunbeam, one of the things I love about it is the color. Actually, the really sparse but brilliant use of color. Yeah. So.
Anything else in the second section, which actually goes on to page 338?
Yeah, more ongoing stuff. Unsequel Walter Bean. There's a Zeta the Space Girl trilogy box set, another series that me and my family swear by. But
that's a great series.
Yeah, so good, so good. Where do you go next from there?
339.
339. Okay, good.
Yeah, with Gallery 13. And we do have on 339 and 341 resolicits of Christophe Chaboutet's Alone and Park Bench, both of which we have discussed on the Eurocomic show. I think Edward and I did.
Yep.
But I knew about this new book coming out, and again, another adaptation. Chaboutet is adapting Jack London's famous short story To Build a Fire for Gallery 13. So I really do enjoy Chaboutet's work. I like Jack London, and especially his story To Build a Fire. I used to teach it all the time in my American Lit survey. And now we get two great things coming together. So it's like chocolate and peanut butter, right? Chaboutet and London, with this adaptation of To Build a Fire. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm hoping that Pascal and I can discuss this on an upcoming Eurocomic show.
I do too, because I really enjoyed your conversation about Alone and Park Bench, and I was a big fan of the Moby Dick. I have to note, though, I like Gallery 13, but Alone was 384 pages for $25. Park Bench is 384 pages for $25. To Build a Fire is $15 for 64 pages. It's a little disappointing. So,
yeah.
but I like Chevautet's work a lot too. So that's good. Yeah.
Where do you go next?
I'm at graphics at 344 next.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There is a Amulet being collected, but there's this.
I know you're a big fan of Amulet.
Yes, I am. But there's an autobiographical book by Jarrett Krasaska, and kids comics fans will know Krasaska's name from the Lunch Lady series and stuff like that. So really for kids, small kids, young kids. This is a little bit of a departure. It's actually autobiographical, and it's about Krasaska's family and struggles with addiction and stuff like that, and just different kinds of very intimate and very personal struggles that Krasaska had. I didn't say the title. It's called Hey Kiddo, subtitled How I Lost My Mother, Found My Father, and Dealt with Family Addiction. And so people know the Lunch Lady series and how silly it is. This is something really different from Jarrett Krasaska, and I've heard some really good things about it from people who've read it in advance, and I think that maybe this is one that Gwen and I will talk about when we start having a weekly reader show. No, I'm just kidding. We haven't decided that, but sometimes we feel the need for it. There's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, there's so much for you guys to discuss. I feel like a month's, one a month show is not enough time for you guys to discuss. Of course, then again, once a week is not enough for us to discuss the number of things we'd like to discuss.
It's true. Yeah. But excited for Hey Kiddo.
Yeah. But, also on that page is something else that looked interesting. And this is The Hidden Witch by Molly Knox Ostertag. And we've had Molly Ostertag on the, on the show before. She does good work. And this is something that looks interesting as well. Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if this is, it mentions actually Witch Boy, which was another graphic novel from Ostertag, but I'm trying to see if Hidden Witch is related in the same world or something like that, or maybe they're just, again, another witch title for this month. But that looked good too.
Well, if you go to the next page, we have yet another adaptation.
That's right.
And this is an adaptation of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. This is by Fred Fordham. I'm not familiar with Fred Fordham's work. I mean, I am familiar with To Kill a Mockingbird, of course, but I'm curious to see, and this is coming out from HarperCollins, and I'm curious to see what they do with this. Yeah.
One of the things that intrigues me is the cover by Fordham, I imagine, has Jem sort of in the foreground, and then Atticus in the midground, and then oh my gosh, how am I blanking on the name of the one that the man that Atticus defends, who is in the background, which just goes to show just critical takes I've read about Lee's perspective of race. This is very much that cover very much reflects the.
So that's the defendant. That's not Boo.
No, that's maybe that is. I don't think so. It looks to me like that's oh geez, how many years did I teach To Kill a Mockingbird as a teacher? I'm blanking on Robin. Somebody's dying.
We know
screaming.
Who you're talking about.
Exactly. Someone's screaming into the podcast. But just that anyway. That's an intriguing cover to depict what is, I think, the perspective on the issues that To Kill a Mockingbird is trying to talk about. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see that adapted.
It reminds me of last year. There was an adaptation of The Good Earth. Was that also a HarperCollins publication?
Oh yeah, I think so. Nick Bertozzi.
And we had wanted to have him on the show for an interview. There was just a lack of communication. We never heard back from him, which is unfortunate because I liked the comics adaptation of The Good Earth.
Me too. I loved it. Yeah. So.
Okay, so I next go to the humanoids section on page 348.
Yeah, me too.
And there are two titles there. There are two new titles that I think there are only two new titles, but they really seem to stand out. The first one is Sebastian Sampson's My New York Marathon. And this is, I guess, their next book in their Life Drawn series, which are supposed to be more or less fantastical, more realistic in tone, something that they started earlier this year. So it says, I guess it's autobiographical because the way they describe it, it says Sebastian, a quiet and shy teacher, gets lost in the memories of his boyhood when he was strong and successful runner. On a whim, he decides to challenge his aging body and crumbling spirit and run the New York Marathon. So that looks interesting. But then the book that's below it also seems fascinating.
Yeah.
Superman isn't Jewish, but I am kinda.
That's a great title.
This is written by Jimmy Burnham and with art by Emile Boudet.
Yeah.
As Benjamin would always proudly say, I'm Jewish, like Superman, assuming that Judaism was some kind of superpower and Hebrew is akin to the Kryptonian language. Benjamin believes each of his family members is a superhero. Until, like Krypton, his world is shattered. After learning of the link between being circumcised and his religion, Ben decides to hide his heritage from everyone. Caught between the desire to avoid disappointing his Jewish father and his desire to understand his Catholic mother, Ben has to find a way to abandon his secret identity for a very public one. So it seems interesting, and the thing that draws me to this title in particular is I've done quite a bit of work in terms of comics and Judaism, and Jewish identity, and so this seems to be right up that alley. Obviously from the solicit.
Yeah. But I am kinda. It's very interesting. I see at the bottom of this cover that it says Life Drawn. Is that an imprint of Humanoids? Is that like autobio books from bio books from Humanoids?
Yeah, Life Drawn is I guess their line of stories that, whether it's more autobiographic or memoirist in nature or not, it doesn't have the same kind of science fiction-y or fantasy feel that I think Humanoids is primarily known for. Got it.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think the first time I saw a reference to Life Drawn, it was in a previews show, in a previews catalog, and I think it was with Gwen that we discussed this. The weird thing is, I had no clue what the hell Life Drawn was, because I saw it. So, they said, the new series Life Drawn, but they didn't explain what that was. Right. I even went to the Humanoid site. There was nothing about Life Drawn, but it was the next month that they actually explained what Life Drawn was. So maybe they just announced it a month too early, because why would you announce something without describing what it was that you were announcing?
Yeah, who knows?
But yeah, I mean, those are good books. I've read a few of them in that line. So it's good that Humanoids is doing this.
Yeah, that looks cool. I'm not until Iron Circus at...
same thing.
Okay.
On page 351.
That's right. So Iron Circus Comics is Spike Trotman's joint, and they've published things like Smut Peddler and Poorcraft and other things. And we have here The Girl Who Married a Skull and Other African Stories. And it looks great. Great looking cover of a girl kissing a skull. But it's kind of drawn in a appealing animation type style. So looks like it could be for various ages. But have you heard the one about the skull who borrowed body parts to pass himself off as a complete human so that he could trick the village beauty into marriage? I haven't, but if you haven't, maybe these and other African stories are ones that you should check out. So that looks really good. And then there's also Meal, a graphic novel written by Soleil Ho and with art by Blue Deliquanti. Apologies if I got that wrong. But it says A Tale of Youth, Good Intentions, and entomophagy. Entomophagy. I don't know. Meal,
I think you got it.
Okay, one of those. Meal is about Yarrow, a young woman determined to make her mark on the cutting edge of cookery with her insect-based creations. Anyway, so yeah, again, the cover art, real appealing looking, something about cooking bugs. So looks good.
Yeah. I've spoken with both Blue Deliquanti and Spike, who's, the force behind Iron Circus a couple of years ago at SBX.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Iron Circus Comics does some really good stuff.
Yeah. These look good. I'm on board for these for sure.
After that, I go to something that maybe is arguably an adaptation. This is on page 355 under the Learner Publishing Group section. And This is Mary Naomi's Jane Austen, Her Heart Did Whisper. And I say maybe an adaptation, maybe not really of a text of Jane Austen, but it's taking the life of Jane Austen and it's creating a story from that.
Yeah, and it's Mary Naomi, who is one of my favorites, probably one of my top, 10, 25 creators in the world. So I like this. Yeah. Yeah.
After that, we go to the Lionforge section, and we've mentioned this before. There just seems to be so much, and maybe even more and more every month coming out of Lionforge. And, many of their books, and I'm not talking about the series, which are interesting in and of themselves, but I think the books that they come out with are fascinating, and many of which are translations.
Yeah.
Are there any things in this month's Lionforge section that really stand out to you?
Yeah, like you were saying, everything that they do is really good. The Magnetic Collection books, and usually when I pick up one of those books at the store, it's very hard to resist buying them. And
those are usually the translations.
That's right, and they're usually just gorgeously done with just the right paper for the work. So we have here Petite by Hubert, maybe written by and art and cover by Bertrand Gatigno. Man. Yeah, thank you. Much better. But Petite is the littlest giant in a hierarchy of giants, merely the size of a human, and whom the rest of the clan consider simple food and labor. So, torn between his savage family instincts and his human empathy, he must discover his place in the world and the kingdom's future. And this cover image of one of these giants in sort of like dressed up in period garb is super intriguing. So this looks good. It's actually the Ogre Gods book, Petite, the Ogre Gods book 1. So, 176 pages of fantasy and horror and more to come, it seems like. So,
yeah. And then we get a series of books from, I think, a newer imprint from Lionforge. Caracal, is that how you pronounce it?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. We've seen a little bit of this stuff, but now there's a lot here. Yeah.
Yeah. We have 3 titles that are solicited. There's the Wormwood Saga, Timothy Top, and then Quantum Mechanics. I don't know about Quantum Mechanics or the Wormwood World Saga, but Timothy Top does seem to be another adaptation. It's written and drawn by Good, and I guess that's how you pronounce his name, Gud. And also because it's one name, I'm betting that it's a European creator. Also, it does have that feel to it if you look at the cover art, although it does seem for younger readers.
Yes, yeah. There's a whole backstory about Lionforge's relationship to European comics, and I don't know it, but I think I've come
primarily
across it
through their Magnetic Collection.
Yeah. But that looks good too. Yeah.
So a lot of good things coming from Lionforge, and it's been a publisher that I know Pascal and I have tapped into or potentially tapping into for past and future Euro Comics series.
Yeah. They've got good kids comics that we should be keeping an eye on too. Yeah.
So do you have anything else in Lionforge you'd like to point out?
No, I think just a general interest, as you said, in all of the stuff, but I'm not until 372.
Well, before that, on 371, this is in the NBM section. We have something. They have NBM is resoliciting many of their past titles like Bluesman and Persia Blues Collection, which are really good. But there's one here. I guess this is a new book. It's written by Jim Barry with art by Val Mayrick, and this is Of Blood and Dust. This, because, the artist is the creator of Howard the Duck. This thrilling tale details the days of the Battle of Little Bighorn through the eyes of Greenhaw, a 7th Cavalry scout on one side of the battlefield, and Slowhawk, a young Lakota warrior on the other.
Interesting. Yeah, I missed this.
So there's that, but I'm probably key on what you're wanting to talk about on 372, which I'm excited about.
Yes. New York Review Comics, always full of interesting stuff that we enjoy reading. This is called Pierrot, graphic novel by Edmond Baudouin, And then also written, and maybe this is the translator, Matt Madden.
Right.
Yeah. So
good old Matt Madden is a great creator that I wish would get more attention and would do more stuff.
Yeah. Actually, back in For a Second, we didn't mention it, but is it For a Second? They're resoliciting, of course. There's Matt Madden's making comics books with Jessica Abel.
His wife. Yeah,
his wife. Yeah, but Piero is by Badon, who I don't know about, but is apparently long been one of the most revered and influential figures in European comics, as it says in this solicit. So, again, this is another instance where knowing nothing about the creator or the book, simply the New York Review Comics imprint makes me interested in the book. So. Yeah.
Right. And, we have reviewed, I would venture to say, most of what New York Review Books has put out, or at least half of their output since they came on the scene about, 2-3 years ago. Mostly on our Eurocomics series. But, just recently you and I reviewed The New World, which, again, is one of the standout titles of 2018 so far.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy what New York Review Comics do. Great stuff. And in fact, yesterday I contacted New York Review Comics and inquired about Piero for a future Eurocomics episode. So that's good.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad that y'all are covering those.
After that, we have Oni. I don't have anything I want to mention in Oni this month.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'll just briefly mention their featured item is a title called "Merry Men," which is kind of a Robin Hood, Robin Hood through queer perspective, queer lenses story, and so you get that new thing that Oni's doing looks good. But yeah, that's all I had to.
Okay. My next two solicits are Adaptations. Again, this is on pages 384 and then 385, two different publishers. Under Pantheon, we get Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation. So this is adapted by Ari Folman and with art by David Polonsky. So I'm curious to see what they do with Anne Frank's Diary for this book. So I'm curious about this. I'm even more excited about what we see on the next page, and this is from Pegasus. This caught me by surprise. This is an adaptation of Albert Camus' The First Man. So this is being done by Ryan Bloom and art by Jacques Ferrandez. The reason that it strikes me as unusual, Pegasus, I think about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I can't remember, adapted The Stranger.
It's on the next page, actually.
Yeah, it's resolicited on the next page. And Gene and I think it was Gene and I, actually reviewed that book. And I thought it was a really good adaptation, fairly true to the original. And I think with these Pegasus books, because they dubbed other adaptations as well.
Right.
Pocahontas, Paradise Lost, both of which are solicited on the next page.
Right.
And I think that's what they do. They try to be true to the original. So fidelity is what they're going for. The reason that The First Man surprises me, and I used to do a lot of work on Albert Camus. The Stranger, yes, that's what he's most known for. If he were known for something else, in other words, if I were going to guess the next adaptation that Pegasus was going to do of Camus' work, The Plague, obviously, right? Maybe The Fall, but definitely The Plague. And I think The Plague is another one of those texts of his that gets a lot of traction.
Right.
And perhaps more than The Fall. First Man? First Man was an very early work of Camus that wasn't translated into English for the longest time. Now it's available, and it has been for a number of years, but it was one of those that was, I guess, alluded to, but rarely discussed. And in some ways, it kind of sets the stage for what we see later in The Stranger. So those are the reasons why it kind of struck me as unusual that their next Albert Camus adaptation from Pegasus is The First Man and not one of the books that the novels and novellas that he is probably better known for. So I don't know. I'm curious. I'd like to discuss this, and maybe this is something else we can discuss on a Eurocomic show.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear that. I didn't know, I read The Stranger in high school, not super familiar with Camus. So it's interesting to hear that about that. Not that sort of out of the ordinary selection. I do wonder if some of that is about the adaptation friendliness of these titles. But that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I do think that the Plague would be great in terms of adaptability. The Fall, perhaps not so much so, because the entire novel is a monologue where you have someone in the first person talking to his, as he's called, interlocutor, right? So someone meets someone else at a bar, and the novel begins with this guy talking. And you don't know exactly who this guy is, but he's telling his story to this person who's listening to him at the bar, and we never get a response from the listener.
Interesting.
And it becomes kind of a monologue where this main character narrator is talking to us as readers. And so it's like we are the ones as readers who were there at the bar with him, listening to him. And over the course of his conversation, he talks about what he feels are some big mistakes that he made in his life, one in particular. And by telling his story, in many ways, he kind of brings the listener, both at the fictional listener at the bar and you as the reader, in on his crime. So you become an accomplice in some ways. Now, I'm probably going on a little too much in a literary mode about this, but that's the professor coming out in me. But it's a fascinating story. I don't know how you would tell something like that in comics form. The Plague would make more sense for me, to me. But, The First Man, I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's all the literature lesson you're going to get for this episode, I guess.
I like it. I'm next at 394. I don't know if you have anything before that.
Yeah, I do. On 387, and this is from Quirk Books. I'm excited about this one. We've had him on the show twice before, Jonathan Morris, to talk about the League of Regrettable Superheroes, and then later the Legion of Regrettable Supervillains. Now we get the League of Regrettable Sidekicks. Have you read any of Morris's League or Legion book or Regrettable books?
I thumbed through, which I think is a fun way to read, to enjoy it. I thumbed through the superheroes. I haven't looked at the Legion of Supervillains yet.
Yeah, the Legion of Regrettable Superheroes, in many ways, it's kind of like what Craig Yo does with Super Weird Heroes, except with Craig's book, we get complete stories. With Morris's book, and they're described here as reference books. I don't know if I'd call them reference books. Perhaps they are. But we get sample art, and we get a write-up of who the weird heroes were. And then in the villains book, who the strange villains were. So now we get a collection of regrettable sidekicks. And one of the things about Jonathan Morris's work, both in these books and also in having him on the show, is his sense of humor, which is poignant, unmistakable. So I'm looking forward to this. I'd like to have Morris back on the show to talk about this Sidekicks book. Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
There is that. So you go to 390, what?
394, and I'm not sure if this is a resolicit or if it's just a U.S. release or something. Do you know, have you seen Ben Rankel's Frank from Renegade Arts Entertainment out before?
I have not, but I noted this as well as something I wanted to bring up. So you talk about this.
Sure. Yeah. It says it's a historical murder mystery set in 1903. Eve Lee seeks to find out what really happened to her missing lover. So intrigued by just the cover and the premise, and also by Renegade Arts Entertainment, I went online and just saw some preview pages, and it does seem like an interesting sort of mystery story. So don't know much about it. It has a ringing endorsement from Brian K. Vaughan somewhere online, but that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. But where are you next after that?
397.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Scribner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and this is by Nora Krug, Belonging, A German Reckons with History and Home. So this is a memoir, and according to the description, we get Krug, who is trying to come to terms with her home country and its fascist Nazi past. Yeah,
it looks interesting. Looks good. I don't know of any work previous from Nora Krug. Do you?
The name looks familiar, and I know I've come across it before. I can't recall for the life of me, though, where I've seen it.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that whole thought of Germany reckoning with its history played out through a particular character seems really, really interesting.
Yeah, and what that tells me is that maybe several years from now, we're going to get a memoir of a Trump voter having to reckon with his or her past history in terms of supporting that maniac.
We shall see. We shall see.
No, I'll be upfront about it. I'm not one to drop the Nazi bomb at the drop of a hat, but I do think that the German people had a lot to answer for in terms of following and backing, maybe unthinkingly in many ways, Adolf Hitler. Same thing with the Italian population and Mussolini. And I think that many Americans are going to have to bear the responsibility of what they've done in terms of not just voting for, but also avidly supporting Trump. Now, you can tell my political persuasions, and I think listeners of the podcast already know that. But,
sure. Yeah. I'm fearful of where the political discourse is going. Sometimes I'll watch a video of a Trump rally and see some 20-year-olds screaming things that I wonder if, in 10, 20, 30 years they're going to regret. And I bet they're, in this footage, in this video that will last forever, screaming the things that they're screaming. And then yet again, I just go, what's the hope that we're going to, anyway, we're definitely tangenting here, but I feel you.
Yeah. On the next page, 398, there's several actually really interesting things. The first I want to mention is yet another adaptation. And this is Ian Colbert's H.P. Lovecraft 4 classic horror stories. And these are adaptations of Lovecraft stories that Self-Made Hero, this is another Self-Made Hero section, has previously come out with. And so you got The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, At the Mountains of Madness, The Shadow Out of Time, and The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. These have come out separately, but now we get all collected together. And in fact, I think it was on, I can't remember if it was Instagram or Twitter yesterday, I saw a posting from Ian Colbert where he's got a finished copy of this collection, and he's holding it in his hand, and he was really proud of it. He says all of these stories collected in one volume. So I'm looking forward to this. This is something that I would love to discuss on the show, and I know that Self-Made Hero does some great things. I'm also interested in that title that's solicited under that, Wolf, by Rachel Ball. I mean, did that strike an interest in you?
Yeah, definitely. Wolf is, I marked both of these titles as well. And actually the Andy Warhol at the top, which is that a resolicit or is that new?
I know that Self-Made Hero came out with one of their, artist biographies devoted to Andy Warhol. I don't know if this is a paperback. Is this paperback or hardbound?
It looks like a paperback.
This may be a softbound for the hardbound that came out about a year and a half or so ago.
Yeah, it did look familiar, so I wasn't sure about that. But
different cover, though.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it looked quite different. Still pop art-y. But no, sorry, to come back to Wolf, which is where you were leading us, by Rachel Ball. It says it's the long, hot summer of 1976. Hugo, youngest child of 3, is walking with his father in the woods, and there he comes face to face with a wolf. And from that moment on, of course, his life will never be the same again. But intrigued by this cover art, and it's just an interesting, looks interesting 296-page hardcover book. So Self-Made Hero has got always some great literary stuff, and so on that account, I'm interested in Ball's Wolf. Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I don't know if this is the same book that I was thinking about, the hardbound biography of Andy Warhol, because I think that we were just talking about him, who did The Good Earth.
Bertozzi.
Yeah, I think he did the art of that book, and I don't know if it was Self-Made Hero or Abrams. I know that Self-Made Hero is distributed through Abrams. I don't know, but
that one was Becoming Andy Warhol, which was actually 2016.
That's what I'm thinking about. Also on that page is a book in Silver Sprocket's section, Snowbird by Aaron K. Wilson, that looks really interesting.
Aaron K. Wilson is trying to save the planet while she herself is unraveling. Using magical realism and manga-inspired illustrations, she tries to find hope for a world that just seems hopeless, sneaking in moments of beauty and friendship that become the framework of redemption. So nice, concise solicits. I thought I'd read it.
Right. And on that next page, this is also a Silver Sprocket title. I mean, we have a resolicit of Pinky and Pepper Forever, but I think I was more interested in Olivia Walsh's You Can Try Again, and this is a one-shot. It says, sentimental girl-oriented sci-fi adventure about clones, math, a gigantic fish, an ambition in the future where AI do mostly everything. At first I was about to say Al. This is the debut long-form webcomic comic from webcomic superstar Olivia Walsh. Now, I don't know her, but apparently she is a webcomic superstar because they say she's a webcomic superstar.
Right, it must be
so
true.
I'll take them on that. But that looks interesting.
Yeah.
And again, Silver Sprocket keeps coming out with interesting titles, but I don't know if we've ever discussed anything from Silver Sprocket, and we should.
Did we ever talk about Passmore? No, I guess not.
No, we didn't.
You mentioned it before, but we should rectify that, Derek. Let's do that.
Yeah,
add it to the list.
Also on that page, 399 is at the bottom under Soaring Penguin Press, Daisy Blackwood, Pilot for Hire, Volume 1, The Cursed Island. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that on the most recent webcomics episode, which went up last week, Daisy Blackwood, Pilot for Hire is one of the webcomics that Sean and I discussed.
Oh, okay.
And we even mentioned the hardbound copy, which I thought had been out for a while, and maybe it has through Kickstarter or something, but here we get it solicited, I think, for the first time.
Cool. Yeah, I got to play some catch up on last week's episode, so I'll be, I want to hear what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, it's good. It really is good. It's a series of shorter tales that have kind of an Indiana Jones-ish feel to them. So I would, recommend getting this volume.
That's cool. Yeah. I have something at 421. I don't know if you have things before it.
Yeah, we probably are going to highlight the same thing. I completely skipped Titan this month. They have a lot of stuff going on, but nothing that strikes me as new and different. But definitely 421 if we're looking at the same triangle square book.
That's what we're looking at. Actually, you did mention Titan. I realized I wrote 421. I meant the facing page for me on 420 has a Titan book called Jonesy, which is it says new books for fans of felines, films, and Firefly on the page. There's Firefly, there's Iron Man stuff, and then I guess this is for the feline lovers. So interesting ad copy there, Titan. But Jonesy is a book. It's little pitches. In space, no one can hear you meow. Hardcover by Rory Lacey, an 80-page comic about cat in space. So there's going to be cat fans that like that. But yeah, let's come back to where we were, Triangle Square Zenobia, written by Morton Durr and with art by Lors Horneman, I think. Yeah. And it says it's the winner of the 2017 Danish National Illustration Award. And it looks good. It's did you have something you want to say about Zenobia?
No, I mean, you can describe the solicit there. I was just going to comment on the fact that I haven't heard of Triangle Square, the publisher, before. Have you?
No, me neither. Yeah. And really kind of the cover here kind of drew my eye to this. Yeah. But some kind of, it basically is, I'll read it. Zenobia was once a great warrior queen of Syria whose reign reached from Egypt to Turkey. She was courageous. No one gave her orders. Once she even went to war against the Emperor of Rome. When things feel overwhelming for Amina, her mother reminds her to think of Zenobia and be strong. Amina is a Syrian girl caught up in a war that reaches her village, and to escape the war, she boards a small boat crammed with other refugees. The boat is rickety, and the turbulent seas send Amina overboard, and in the dark water, Amina remembers playing hide and seek with her mother and making dolmas, which is stuffed grape leaves, and the journey she had to undertake with her uncle to escape. And she thinks of the brave warrior Zenobia. So yeah, that's a very, very intriguing sounding premise for me. And so I don't know anything about Triangle Square. Didn't do the research here, but that's a book I'm going to add to my to look out for list.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've only got one more thing before we get to the manga section.
Okay, let's go.
And this is actually on the next page, 422. And this is a magazine. This comes from Tomorrow's Publishing, and it is Retrofan Magazine #1. And the reason I wanted to mention this actually is for a couple of reasons. It is edited by Michael Urie, who does back issue. And Michael Urie is a really good guy. He lives not far from where I live. He lives in Concord, North Carolina. He has been doing work with Tomorrow's for quite a while. Again, editor of back issue. But I also had the pleasure of having him on the Comics Alternative when he came out last year. I think it was last year with Hero a Go-Go, which was looking at the camp craze of the late 1960s, especially, and how it found its way not only in comics but in a variety of other popular media. Really, really good book. But Michael Urie is a great guy, and this is his new magazine at this year's Heroes Con. And listeners can go back to listen to my, on-site interviews at this year's Heroes Con. I talked with Mike Urie, and he specifically discussed with me this new magazine. And they had sample issues out of Retrofan at the time. And as fate would have it, I spoke with him on that Saturday at Heroes Con. When I got back late that day, I checked my mail, and I'll be damned if I didn't get a sample issue directly from Tomorrow's of Retrofan.
Oh, cool.
So it was weird. I just talked with Michael about it, and then Tomorrow sent me as a reviewer, media person, a sample copy. And it is really good. I mean, Retrofan magazine is, as the title suggests, it's all about retro matters, the past, so there's a lot about, growing up and watching Saturday morning cartoons, the things that were a part of popular culture during the 1960s, 70s, and even 80s. So it's really interesting. If you're a fan of retro matters and older pop culture, then this is definitely a magazine for you. And Tomorrow's does great stuff when it comes to their magazines.
That's right. Always gotta, put a word in if we can for so much of an education that Tomorrow's provides us.
Do you have anything before the manga section, or anything in the manga section for that matter?
Nothing before it, but yes, a couple things in the manga section. I start at 464. I don't know if you have anything before that.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
In the Viz section on page 459, we get yet another title from Junji Ito, and this is Frankenstein, Junji Ito Story Collection. So a lot of stories in this collection have this Frankenstein spin on it, apparently in some form or another. I really enjoy Junji Ito's writing, although one of the things that Shay and I have discussed on past manga shows is, and I hate to say this because as much as I like Junji Ito's work, after a while, some of his stories seem to be kind of like spinning wheels. It's the same thing kind of over and over again. But I nonetheless like them. I mean, even if they don't resonate as much as some of his maybe more notable works, a lot of these shorter stories are still worth reading. And if you like manga horror or horror manga, then definitely Junji Ito is someone that you should check out. On 461 is a box set, the complete Tokyo Ghoul. And this is by Shui Ishida. I read all of Tokyo Ghoul. I sampled it, I think, for the first time about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and with the very first volume. And they came out in Viz's signature editions. I guess I recommend Tokyo Ghoul. And the reason I'm tentative about this, I think it started really well, but in terms of my sensibilities or my tastes, it turned into something that I wasn't enjoying as much. And that is just a series of one fight scene after another. Now, if you like fight scene and those action, the kineticness of a lot of manga, then this is definitely something that you will grow to like as you continue through the series.
Yeah.
But here we have all 14 volumes are collected. And whereas I was excited when Tokyo Ghoul began, when I first began reading the series, I was a little more lukewarm toward the end and was actually glad once volume 14 wrapped everything up, at least in the main series. But if you're a fan of this, then you can get this complete box set.
Yeah, it seemed, I read, I think, one or two Tokyo Ghoul from the library. It seemed like, with manga, I'm always wondering, is this going to take me down a rabbit hole of, as we see on this facing page, Bleach, volume 74, final volume, am I going to be reading volume 63 of something, and it's just going to wind on and on forever? Or is it going to be something like what I anticipate on the next page, Inio Asano's Volume 3 of Dead DDD, something that is really smartly crafted and finite and things like that. So
did you read that first volume?
I did. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I loved your conversation about it too.
And I just this week got through DCB Service, our sponsor, the second volume of Dead Demons, DDD Destruction. And so I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah. We love Asano here. But that's kind of my fear about starting a new manga series. But, is that hole that I will fall down. But I never finished Tokyo Ghoul. So it's interesting to hear your take on it.
Yeah. Like I said, it's okay. Now, where did you say you go in the manga section?
I was kind of intrigued by 464. This new, I guess for me, it's always, as you can hear, an education and catch up. I'm playing catch up with manga, but this series is called Aoharu Ride, Io Sakisaka, and it's a shoujo romance. I don't read a ton of shoujo romance, but this art looks great, and it's basically Futaba Yoshioka thought all boys were loud and obnoxious until she met Ko Tanaka in junior high. And then by the time she realized she liked him, he's moved away. But then he comes back. And so, so it may be an interesting series. It does say it's now become a classic, and Sakisaka has written a Yalsa award for Strobe Edge and things like that. These are things I don't know about, but maybe this is an interesting one for me to start some shoujo romance.
Yeah, I marked that one as well, and I'd like for Shay and I to discuss this on a future manga show.
That'd be great. Yeah,
looks good. After that, I go to Kodansha on page 476.
I just want to mention at 471 that the third book in Svetlana Chmakova's series that started with Awkward and then went to Brave, the third.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Third book is set in Berrybrook Middle School, which is where Chmakova has set these books, is entitled Crush. And readers who have enjoyed Awkward and Brave will know that Jorge has been one of the sort of side characters who now takes center stage, and that looks really good. We're looking forward to that one.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is one of a few, I think, examples of a solicit in the manga section that is not really manga, but I don't know where Smakova originates. My guess is not Japan. Given the name, but it's an art that's informed by what you could argue is largely, I guess, loosely speaking, a manga style.
Yeah.
I mean, there are various manga styles, and so to talk about one manga style, I think, is problematic, highly problematic. But but it's definitely influenced by manga. And there are other titles I noticed, I can't remember off the top of my head, that aren't from Japan. So, in other words, not technically manga, but are manga influenced.
Right.
And I find that curious that they're in the manga section.
Yeah. It seems just by publisher, and this is Yen Press, right? So I'm guessing that's why. But this book especially seems to fit just as well in the green section or something like that. But either way, regardless, I think the big sales are not going to come from Previews catalog orders anyway. The big sales of these are in bookstores and Scholastic and things like that. Right. So yeah.
Okay, in the Kodansha section on page 476 is Battle Angel, Alita, Holy Knight, and Other Stories. I really like Yukito Kishiro's Battle Angel, Alita, at least the main series. And I think we're up to maybe volume 4, that they've come out with. And I really do like what Kodansha is doing in putting out these nice hardbound collections of Battle Angel, Alita. Right. But here we have a collection of stories that are outside of the main storyline, and it says that this deluxe collector's hardcover includes 4 classic Battle Angel, Alita stories, never before published in English, plus special bonus material. So if you're a fan of Battle Angel, Alita, then definitely grab a hold of this one. Battle Angel Alita, Holy Knight, and Other Stories.
Yeah. Battle Angel Alita, good stuff. I've probably read the equivalent of the first volume of that stuff. So,
under Seven Seas Entertainment, and Shay and I have been doing more stuff with Seven Seas books, and this is something else that I think I'd like to discuss on the show, and this is on page 480. It's from Yugo Ishikawa, Wonderland, Volume 1. And so, again, this is arguably yet another adaptation. It says, an Alice in Wonderland-inspired horror of humans shrinking and learning to survive in their suddenly frightening world. When humans en masse shrink down to tiny size, a girl named Alice and her pup Poco find themselves struggling to survive. Surrounded by strange yet familiar sights, they work to make a new life. That's easier said than done, however, in a world that's bigger and more dangerous than ever.
Yeah, looks good.
Seems interesting.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah. Whatever you guys talk about on the manga show, I tend to be interested in reading. So, yeah.
Do you have anything else in the manga section?
Nope, that does it for me.
Okay, I have one more thing, and this is the last thing I have, not only in the manga section, but in this month's previews. And this is from Vertigo Comics on page 482, and it seems a little weird. It's by Bukub Okawa. Pop Team Epic, Volume 1. And the image on the front are these two, they're more cartoony than manga looking, but these two girls flipping the bird directly at
both
you.
Birds. Both,
yes, for both hands.
All the birds they have.
Exactly. And it's described this way, a bizarre 4-panel manga that centers around two 14-year-old girls, Papuko and Pepimi. Don't be fooled by their cute appearance, though. This is one crazy manga. A cult favorite in Japan, Pop Team Epic, parodies other manga and pop culture. And because of the parody aspect of this, I'm curious. I want to see what this is all about.
Yeah, it looks funny.
So there you go. And we're over 2 hours now, but did you expect less? Look at the latest previews catalog.
Yeah, it was good. Always good comics coming down the pipe, and we have much to look forward to and talk about on the show. So, people chime in on what you're interested in, what you're excited about, and what you hope to hear us talk about on the Comics Alternative.
That's right. And you can rest assured that every single thing that Paul and I discussed on this episode can be found at great discounts at where else? Discount Comic Book Service. Remember, discount is in their name. They are the sponsor of the Comics Alternative. You definitely should check them out because you can't beat their prices. So go to their website, dcbservice.com, and there you will find a whole slew of specials. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you could leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way. Pick up your phone and dial 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
You can also email us, and we'd love to hear from you in whatever form, but email's great too. We're two guys at comicsalternative.com. Derek is DEREK at comicsalternative.com, and I'm PAUL at comicsalternative.com.
Yeah, and we are all over social media, so contact us that way if you prefer. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher, but you can also find us on Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
comicsalternative.com. And, stay tuned. If for some crazy reason you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe so that you can hear all the good content we provide for you here at the Comics Alternative.
That's right. And, a couple of reminders. One, remember last week was our 6th anniversary, and we shouted out on that show and also have been tweeting out. Let us know some of your favorite episodes or what you like most about the Comics Alternative. 1 or 2 people have chimed in. Maybe if more chime in and let us know what they consider their favorite episodes, we can share some of those correspondences next week. But the other thing I want to remind listeners to do is definitely check out the Motherbox podcast, whether you're a Kirby fan or not.
That's right. Hear us having some fun reading Kirby together. But
it gets wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Sure. Yeah. And we will be back next week. And remember, next week will be a James Bond Dynamite special.
That's right. Bond.
That's right. James Bond. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul. Take care.